In this video, we're breaking down 3 hours of Chum Bucket lore from SpongeBob. Let's get started. Starting it off with, Welcome to the Chum Bucket, the episode where SpongeBob becomes Plankton's employee. The setup? The episode kicks off at closing time at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs locks up the restaurant and tells SpongeBob he's heading out to play cards. When SpongeBob asks who he's playing with, Mr. Krabs drops a bombshell. He's going to the Chum Bucket to play cards with Plankton. SpongeBob is shocked. He can't understand why Mr. Krabs would play cards with his sworn enemy, the tiny villain who's been trying to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula for years. Mr. Krabs explains his reasoning with pure confidence. He tells SpongeBob that Plankton is the worst card player in all of Bikini Bottom. For 15 years straight, every single Thursday night, Mr. Krabs has been winning money from Plankton at their weekly card games. Mr. Krabs has never lost, not once. The two laugh about it and go their separate ways for the night. Everything seems normal. The morning after. The next morning brings a complete change in atmosphere. Mr. Krabs walks to work crying. SpongeBob arrives at the Krusty Krab in a good mood, still laughing about Mr. Krabs taking Plankton to the cleaners. But when he sees his boss crying and leaning against the doors, SpongeBob knows something went terribly wrong. He asks how the card game went. Mr. Krabs admits he lost. SpongeBob immediately assumes the worst. Did Mr. Krabs lose money? No. Did he lose the Krusty Krab itself? No. Did he lose the Krabby Patty secret formula? No. Mr. Krabs points directly at SpongeBob and reveals the truth. He lost SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs bet SpongeBob's work contract in the card game and lost it to Plankton. SpongeBob thinks it's a joke at first. He laughs it off and tries to walk into the Krusty Krab to start making Krabby Patties. But Mr. Krabs' claw stops him. SpongeBob keeps trying to walk forward but gets nowhere, eventually falling to the floor. Mr. Krabs tells him the devastating news. SpongeBob doesn't work at the Krusty Krab anymore. The transfer of ownership. Squidward runs outside, hoping this is all just a cruel joke, but Plankton walks over and confirms it's real. SpongeBob now works for Plankton at the Chum Bucket. Plankton jumps onto SpongeBob's head, kicks off his beloved Krusty Krab employee hat, and tries to put a bucket helmet with the letters CB on SpongeBob's head instead. SpongeBob screams and runs to Mr. Krabs, knocking off both Plankton and the bucket helmet. He begs Mr. Krabs, saying he doesn't want to work for Plankton. He wants to stay at the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs both start crying and hug each other tightly. Mr. Krabs apologizes, saying it's all his fault. Plankton pretends to sound sad, asking what kind of cold and heartless person would break apart such a loving relationship. Then he answers his own question. He would. Plankton pulls out a crowbar and uses it to pry SpongeBob away from Mr. Krabs. SpongeBob goes flying through the air and slams into a cage. Mr. Krabs' arms are still clinging to SpongeBob, but they fall off when he hits the cage. Plankton walks over and shuts the cage door, locking SpongeBob inside. Plankton's victory speech. Plankton reveals his master plan. He tells Mr. Krabs this is his greatest mistake. For 15 years, Plankton has been throwing those card games on purpose, just waiting for Mr. Krabs to slip up and make a bet he couldn't afford to lose. Plankton admits he doesn't have the precious Krabby Patty formula, but he has something almost as good, the guy who makes the patties. A propeller emerges from the top of the cage. It starts spinning and lifts the cage into the air, flying SpongeBob across the street to the Chum Bucket. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs call out to each other as they're separated. Mr. Krabs cries and asks if he can have his arms back. Plankton walks over and throws the arms onto Mr. Krabs' head. Inside the Chum Bucket laboratory, the cage carrying SpongeBob hovers over a spotlight inside the Chum Bucket and drops him down. SpongeBob asks where he is. The lights turn on all around him. Computer screens with wires start powering up. A giant boiler turns on. SpongeBob gasps and yelps at each new sight. Then a light illuminates a calendar on the wall. The calendar is titled Science, and the photo shows a nerdy-looking guy standing in front of a blackboard. SpongeBob screams. Plankton bursts through the doors and announces he's ready for his Krabby Patty. SpongeBob stammers, trying to explain that he hasn't made anything yet. Plankton makes his position clear. SpongeBob works for Plankton now. As his new boss, Plankton commands SpongeBob to make him a patty right away. If SpongeBob refuses, Plankton threatens to remove his brain and put it inside a robot chef. Plankton points to a giant robot standing in the laboratory that looks somewhat like SpongeBob. Plankton tells SpongeBob to get cooking and twangs his nose. The kitchen that isn't home. SpongeBob finds himself standing in front of a weird-looking grill. Nothing about this kitchen feels right. He picks up a spatula with a spring on the end. When he puts his fingers near one of the holes in the grill, steam bursts out and burns him. He screams in pain. SpongeBob looks at a digital sign that reads, Kitchen. He thinks to himself that while the sign says kitchen, his heart says jail. This is when SpongeBob starts singing about how a stove is a stove no matter where you go. Mr. Krabs, back at the Krusty Krab, sings back that a patty is a patty. That's what he says. SpongeBob continues that a grill is a grill. This is surely so. Mr. Krabs responds that fries should be fries either way. But then SpongeBob's voice turns sad. He sings that this grill is not a home. This is not the stove he knows. Mr. Krabs sings that he would trade it all away if SpongeBob would come back to stay. Together, they sing that this kitchen isn't the same without SpongeBob. It's just a greasy spoon without him. SpongeBob starts crying. Plan B, the robot chef. Plankton watches this musical breakdown and asks what SpongeBob is doing. All these tears and the show tunes, why isn't SpongeBob making the patties? Plankton decides to forget trying to get SpongeBob to cooperate. He announces he's going with Plan B, putting putting SpongeBob's brain inside the robot chef. Karen, Plankton's computer wife, tells him that approach never works. She provides the answer. To get to SpongeBob, Plankton needs to show him compassion and understanding. Then SpongeBob will give Plankton what he wants. Plankton tells Karen to be quiet because he's thinking. Then he announces he's got it. To get to SpongeBob, he'll show him compassion and understanding. Then SpongeBob will give him what he wants. This is the exact same solution Karen just suggested, but Plankton acts like it's his own original idea. SpongeBob's failed cooking attempts. We see SpongeBob trying to cook a Krabby Patty using one of Plankton's strange cooking machines. When he opens the cage on the machine, a patty with a hand crawls toward him like a monster. SpongeBob quickly slams the cage shut. Plankton walks in and says hello. SpongeBob apologizes, explaining he's tried his best, but he's not used to cooking this way. He begs Plankton not to take his brain out. Plankton stops him and says he's capable of compassion and understanding. SpongeBob gets excited and says, if that's true, then he'd like to go back to the Krusty Krab. Plankton immediately shuts that down, saying they shouldn't get carried away. Instead, he asks what he can do to make SpongeBob more comfortable at the Chum Bucket. Making SpongeBob comfortable. SpongeBob mentions he usually cooks on a grill. Plankton says he'll get one right away. He brings in an old frying grill and suggests they try it out. SpongeBob looks at it and mentions he's used to the grill facing the other direction. Plankton says he'll take care of everything and starts pushing the grill. He asks if this position is good. SpongeBob asks him to move it a little more to the left. Plankton keeps moving it, asking repeatedly if the position is right. SpongeBob keeps saying to keep going, almost there, just a little more. Finally, SpongeBob says it's perfect, right there. Plankton growls in anger. Then SpongeBob adds that he still doesn't know. Something still doesn't feel right. The exact replica. The scene cuts to SpongeBob wearing a blindfold. Plankton tells him to take just a few more steps. Then he tells SpongeBob to take off the blindfold. When SpongeBob removes it, he gasps. Plankton has created an exact replica of the Krusty Krab kitchen inside the Chum Bucket. SpongeBob gets excited, pointing out all the familiar details. There's the sink, the greasy fryers, the squeaky floorboards, and that thing over there. SpongeBob announces that one Krabby Patty is coming up, Mr. Krabs. But then his face turns sad. He realizes Mr. Krabs isn't there. SpongeBob starts wailing and crying about Mr. Krabs. Plankton tries to comfort him, saying not to cry. He'll show SpongeBob that working for him is much better. Plankton asks if there's anything that old Skinflint Krabs wouldn't let SpongeBob have. SpongeBob admits there is one thing he's always wanted. Spoiling SpongeBob, rotten. The next scene shows SpongeBob wearing fancy vibrating shoes. He says wow with excitement. Plankton asks if SpongeBob now has everything he needs to make some Krabby Patties. SpongeBob pauses and says, well, the scene cuts to SpongeBob relaxing in a bubble bath, licking green mint ice cream. Plankton asks if he's ready to make some patties now. SpongeBob tells him to wait until he finishes his ice cream. The scene cuts again to SpongeBob riding a toy seahorse with Plankton pushing him from behind. While pushing, Plankton asks about those patties. SpongeBob just laughs and yells for Plankton to go faster. Next, we see Plankton reading SpongeBob a baby book. Plankton reads that the littlest sea elf said something, but then he feels drool drop on him. He looks up to see SpongeBob has fallen asleep. Plankton growls in anger and pulls out a mallet, clearly wanting to hit SpongeBob, but he tells himself to stay steady. It's all going to pay off soon enough. He throws the mallet away. SpongeBob wakes up and Plankton greets him cheerfully, asking what he'd like to do. The breaking point. SpongeBob says all this preparation is making him hungry. Plankton agrees and says he's hungry too. He asks SpongeBob what would really hit the spot. Why doesn't SpongeBob whip them up a couple of Krabby Patties? SpongeBob says he's kind of in the mood for tacos instead. Plankton laughs nervously, saying that's a good one. But really, why doesn't SpongeBob go ahead and make them a patty? SpongeBob yawns and says, nah, he doesn't really feel like it. Plankton says he doesn't understand. SpongeBob drinks from a cup, while Plankton lists everything he's provided. The grill, the spatula, the comfy chair. Then Plankton loses his cool. With fumes rising from his hands, he mentions that he even rubs SpongeBob's putrid feet. SpongeBob, now acting like a spoiled brat, tells Plankton to ask him later and calls him half pint. Plankton growls in fury and commands SpongeBob to make him a patty right now. SpongeBob crosses his arms and refuses. He says no. Plankton tells him not to back sass. SpongeBob mocks Plankton by making nonsense sounds. Plankton asks what he just said. SpongeBob responds by blowing a raspberry and turning around to Moon Plankton. Plankton has had enough. He announces that SpongeBob just lost his brain privileges. Robot Bob Spong Chef Pants. The scene cuts to Plankton outside his laboratory. He's successfully finished building a robot that looks like SpongeBob. Plankton tells SpongeBob to come in. He laughs and tries to come up with a name for the robot. Robot Bob Sponge. Chef Pants? He can't quite decide. Plankton breaks the fourth wall by turning to the audience and saying he put the brain in the robot. Then he turns to the robot SpongeBob and tells him he shouldn't have been a spoiled brat. Plankton explains that he always gets what he wants, and he wants Robot SpongeBob to make him a Krabby Patty. Robot SpongeBob makes beeping sounds and then responds in a robotic voice, "Why don't you ask me later?" It's the same thing SpongeBob said earlier. Plankton freaks out, asking, "What? What?" Robot SpongeBob tells him to get welded. Plankton presses a button on the control panel and commands the robot to make him a Krabby Patty. Robot SpongeBob is now sitting down reading a comic book. He says he doesn't want to and drinks some oil. Plankton screams in complete madness. The return. The scene cuts to the Krusty Krab. The sky is dark and gray. The restaurant looks empty and abandoned. Mr. Krabs stands outside, holding an out-of-business sign. He tells the restaurant that this looks like their final chapter. Then he hears someone approaching. It's Plankton, and he's crying. Plankton says he can't take it anymore. Mr. Krabs has to take that yellow nightmare back. It's not worth it. Plankton admits he's better off just stealing a Krabby Patty fair and square like he usually does. Mr. Krabs pauses. He takes the out-of-business sign off the doors. Then he tells Plankton that a deal is a deal. SpongeBob is Plankton's headache now. Plankton begs for mercy. He says he'll do anything. He's literally begging Mr. Krabs to take SpongeBob back. Mr. Krabs thinks about it. Then he makes an offer. How about Plankton gives Mr. Krabs $50, and Mr. Krabs will take SpongeBob off his hands? Plankton immediately agrees. It's a deal. He even admits he cheated in the card game anyway. Mr. Krabs tells Plankton to be gone and throws him back inside the chum bucket. Plankton thanks him as he flies through the air. Then there's a crashing sound, and Plankton says, "Ouch." Back home, SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs that both he and his brain are glad to be back. Mr. Krabs says he's glad to have SpongeBob back. But then he immediately tells SpongeBob to get to those patties, because the lunch rush is coming. SpongeBob yawns and says he doesn't feel like it. He tells Mr. Krabs to ask him later, calling him Krabby. SpongeBob laughs at his own joke. Mr. Krabs just glares at him with an angry expression. SpongeBob quickly changes his tune. He says he means that he's working all day for free. His treat. He runs into the kitchen to start cooking. Mr. Krabs says that's what he thought SpongeBob said. The episode's impact. This episode reveals a lot about the characters and their relationships. First, it shows just how far Mr. Krabs' greed can go. He was so confident in his card-playing abilities that he bet his best employee's contract. This overconfidence led to him losing the one thing that keeps the Krusty Krab successful, SpongeBob's cooking skills. Second, it demonstrates the genuine love SpongeBob has for his job at the Krusty Krab. When forced to work elsewhere, even with all the luxuries Plankton provides, SpongeBob cannot cook. The environment matters more to him than the equipment or the perks. He needs the emotional connection to his workplace and his boss to perform his best. Third, the episode highlights Plankton's desperate attempts to steal the Krabby Patty formula through any means necessary. When he can't get the formula itself, he tries to get the fry cook who makes the patties. But even this plan backfires because Plankton fundamentally misunderstands what makes SpongeBob such a good cook. The dynamic between Karen and Plankton also gets explored. Karen clearly sees the solution to getting SpongeBob to cooperate, but Plankton dismisses her advice only to claim it as his own idea seconds later. This shows the pattern in their marriage, where Karen provides the intelligence and Plankton provides the ego. Finally, the episode shows that Plankton's 15-year plan had a fatal flaw. He assumed that getting SpongeBob away from the Krusty Krab would give him access to Krabby Patty making abilities. But he didn't account for SpongeBob's loyalty, emotional needs, and how quickly a spoiled SpongeBob would become impossible to manage. Even when Plankton put SpongeBob's brain in a robot, the robot inherited SpongeBob's bratty attitude from that day. The episode ends with everything returning to normal, but with Mr. Krabs having learned an expensive lesson. The $50 Plankton paid him likely didn't even come close to making up for the money the Krusty Krab lost by being closed, and SpongeBob learned that he can push his luck a bit with Mr. Krabs, HTI, but not too far. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have The Algae's Always Greener, the episode where Plankton switches lives with Mr. Krabs. Another failed attempt. The episode opens at the Krusty Krab during regular business hours. Old Man Walker, an elderly fish who can barely see, walks straight into a pole. He apologizes to the pole, calling it a young lady. He takes off his glasses to get a better look and says, "What a fox." Still thinking the pole is a person, Old Man Walker walks over to the condiment station and picks up a bottle of ketchup to put on his tray. What he doesn't know is that Plankton is hiding inside the ketchup bottle. This is Plankton's latest scheme to steal a Krabby Patty. Inside the bottle, Plankton laughs evilly. His machine detects a nearby Krabby Patty, and he gets excited. He tells the patty that it's all his now. An alarm goes off inside the ketchup bottle, and Plankton buckles himself in for safety. He announces he's initiating the launch sequence. He puts on a mask and zips up the eye zipper, though he unzips the mouth part so he can talk. Plankton yells that the Krabby Patty, "Here he comes." Old Man Walker holds the ketchup bottle in his shaky hands. He says he hopes he doesn't miss again. This means he's already missed his food multiple times before. He presses the bottle, but because his aim is so bad, he points it in the completely wrong direction. Instead of the ketchup landing on his food, it shoots Plankton out of the bottle like a rocket. Plankton yells, "Reunited, and it's gonna feel so good." As he flies through the air, he unzips his eye zipper while laughing. Then he realizes he's flying toward a wall and starts screaming. Plankton crashes right through the wall of the Krusty Krab, leaving a hole. Squidward sees the hole and makes a shocked expression. The scene cuts to Mr. Krabs sitting at his desk in his office. He's rubbing his eyes with dollar bills and saying how much he loves his sweet money. Suddenly, Plankton comes bouncing around the office after crashing through the wall. Mr. Krabs asks what's happening. He quickly hides under his desk for protection and calls out for Squidward, asking him to shield Mr. Krabs with his big forehead. Plankton finally stops bouncing and lands right next to the desk. Mr. Krabs picks him up and realizes what just happened. He gets very close to Plankton's face and explains this was just another failed Krabby Patty theft attempt by his arch competitor, Plankton. Mr. Krabs laughs and says for a second there he mistook Plankton for an actual threat. But Plankton is just a dirty little man. Mr. Krabs flicks Plankton away with his claw and says, "So long, shrimp." An actual shrimp who is leaving the Krusty Krab hears this and turns around, thinking Mr. Krabs is talking to him. Plankton goes flying through the air toward the Chum Bucket across the street. He yells, "Curse you, Mr. Krabs!" as he flies. He collides into the wall of the Chum Bucket and says, "Ow!" Then he falls to the ground and says, "Ouch!" Life at the Chum Bucket. After a bubble transition, we see Plankton walking into the Chum Bucket. He's sighing with exhaustion and defeat. Karen, his computer wife, greets him by saying it looks like another typical day of failure. Plankton tells Karen to can it. He calls her his computer wife in an annoyed tone. He asks if she can't see that he's exhausted. He tells Karen to go make herself useful and synthesize him up some food. Plankton walks over and opens the fridge to get a can of soda. Karen responds by saying, "Yes, Your Majesty," in a sarcastic way. A holographic meatloaf appears on the table where Plankton is sitting. Plankton sits down at his table and looks at the food. He asks what they have here. He uses his fork to try to eat the holographic meatloaf, but the fork goes right through it because it's not real. Plankton speaks sarcastically and says, "Oh, goody, holographic meatloaf again." He's clearly sick of eating fake food. He pounds the table with his fist, which causes the holographic meatloaf to fall off the table and disappear. Plankton complains about when he's going to get some real food. He points out that Mr. Krabs gets to eat real food. Plankton even mentions that Mr. Krabs' daughter is as big as a whale, proving how much real food the Krabs family has. Plankton opens his can of soda and says he wishes he could be successful like Mr. Krabs. He wishes he could somehow just switch lives with Mr. Krabs just to know what it's like. Plankton takes a drink from his soda. Karen responds with a simple solution. She asks why Plankton doesn't just use that switch lives just to know what it's like Mographier thing he built last Tuesday. Plankton spits out his soda in shock. He says what a brilliant idea. He tells Karen that her parents must have been like part computer or something. This is supposed to be a compliment, but it doesn't make much sense since Karen is a computer. Karen just sighs and rolls her eyes at Plankton's comment. The life-switching machine. After another bubble transition, Plankton is already sitting in front of the switch lives just to know what it's like Mographier. This machine has a screen that shows different sea creatures. Plankton says, "Now, let's see here." A picture of a jellyfish shows up on the screen. Plankton says no. A dolphin appears next. Plankton says no again. Then a mermaid appears on the screen. Plankton says no once more. Finally, a picture of a crab in the shape of Mr. Krabs shows up. Plankton says, "Aha, he's found his target." Plankton gets buckled into the machine for safety. He tells Karen that he hates to leave her, but you know what they say, a rolling stone gathers no algae. This is a play on the real saying a rolling stone gathers no moss, but Plankton changed it to fit the episode's title about algae. Plankton presses a button on the machine. He immediately gets sucked through a hole of space and time. He starts screaming as he travels through what looks like a colorful tunnel. The tunnel is transporting him to the alternate universe where he and Mr. Krabs have switched lives. While traveling through the tunnel, Plankton stops screaming for a moment. He takes a drink of soda that he's somehow still holding. Then he starts screaming again as he continues traveling. The camera fades to black. Waking up in the new life. The scene cuts to Plankton drooling on a desk. But it's not his desk at the Chum Bucket. It's Mr. Krabs' desk at the Krusty Krab. Plankton wakes up and says, "Dear Neptune above, what happened last night?" He looks around confused. Then he sees something on the desk. He picks up a nameplate. Instead of saying Mr. Krabs like it normally would, the nameplate reads Mr. Plankton. Plankton is surprised by this. He picks up a framed picture. It's a photo of Pearl, Mr. Krabs' whale daughter. Plankton starts to say, "Who the Davy," but stops mid-sentence when he looks out the office windows. He sees people sitting in the restaurant eating Krabby Patties. Plankton puts the pieces together. He says, "I'm in the Krusty Krab, and that means the life switcher was a success. The Krusty Krab is mine." He looks down at himself and sees he's dressed in Mr. Krabs' clothes. He says corporate casual while admiring his new outfit. A voice calls out from the kitchen. It's an alternate universe version of SpongeBob. He announces that an order is up, 2 deluxe Krabby Patties. Plankton's eye literally turns into the shape of a Krabby Patty. He says, at last, because he finally has access to Krabby Patties. Getting the Krabby Patty. Alternate universe SpongeBob delivers food to a customer at a table. He says, "There you are, sir, 2 deluxe." But before he can finish, he notices Mr. Plankton has appeared at the table. SpongeBob greets him by saying, "Ahoy there, Mr. Plankton." Plankton stammers nervously. He says, hey there, SpongeBob. SpongeBob?" He's not used to being called Mr. Plankton or being treated like the boss. Alternate universe SpongeBob responds with, "Yes, sir?" Steam is literally coming out of his mouth, showing how eager and ready he is to serve. Mr. Plankton tries to sound professional. He says he's going to need to take one of these patties back to his office for bun inspection. This is clearly an excuse to get his hands on a Krabby Patty. But alternate universe SpongeBob immediately says that Mr. Plankton can't do that. When Plankton asks why not, SpongeBob explains that the patty is for the customer. It wouldn't be right to take the customer's food. Mr. Plankton gets angry and starts to threaten the customer. He says, "The customer? I'll boil the customer in hot oil and rip out his..." But then alternate universe SpongeBob's eyes point toward the customer who is sitting right there listening. The customer is alternate universe Nat Peterson. Mr. Plankton quickly changes his tone and says, yes, of course, for the lovely customer." Alternate universe SpongeBob has a solution. He gives Mr. Plankton 2 different Krabby Patties. SpongeBob explains that he made these patties just in case Mr. Plankton decided to do some bun inspection today. SpongeBob is so prepared and eager to please that he made extra patties ahead of time. Mr. Plankton takes the patties and says, yes, very nice, thanks." He runs back to his office holding the 2 Krabby Patties. Living Mr. Krabs' life. Mr. Plankton sits in the office looking at everything he now owns. He says it's all finally his. He lists what he has, the patties, the wealth, and the notoriety. When he mentions the wealth, we see he has access to Mr. Krabs' money vault full of cash. When he mentions notoriety, we see business award certificates and a framed cover of Clams magazine on the wall showing his success. But then Mr. Plankton notices someone in his office. It's alternate universe SpongeBob again. Plankton asks what SpongeBob wants now. SpongeBob explains that it's Tuesday again. He was wondering if he could have his weekly performance review. Every Tuesday, SpongeBob gets a review of how well he's doing at work. Mr. Plankton says, "Review?" He's confused because he's never had to review anyone's work performance before. The only thing he's ever reviewed was some foreign exercise videos his cousin sent him. Alternate universe SpongeBob begs and says, "Oh yes, please sir, please." He really wants this performance review. SpongeBob says he wants to make Mr. Plankton so happy and proud. Mr. Plankton just wants SpongeBob to leave. He says SpongeBob is doing fine and tells him to leave so Mr. Plankton can get back to work. He kisses one of the 2 Krabby Patties he took from the dining area. But SpongeBob says, "But sir," and won't leave. Mr. Plankton thought he sent SpongeBob away. He calls SpongeBob a cretin, which means a stupid person. Alternate universe SpongeBob starts to tear up. He says there has to be something he needs to improve on. Anything at all. SpongeBob desperately wants to know how he can be better. Mr. Plankton just wants SpongeBob gone, so he says something random to end the conversation. He says, "All right, the sauce." SpongeBob gasps and asks, "What? What?" Mr. Plankton explains that SpongeBob is using too much sauce. He doesn't actually know if this is true. He just made it up. Mr. Plankton says he doesn't know. Maybe SpongeBob uses too much sauce, okay? The review is over. SpongeBob's breakdown. Something terrible happens to alternate universe SpongeBob when he hears this criticism. His eyes squint, his nose droops, and his mouth shrinks. He starts moving his arms forward and back in a jerky, robotic way. Each time he moves, he stutters and says, Mr. Plankton asks what's wrong. SpongeBob just keeps stuttering, over and over. Mr. Plankton tries to calm him down. He asks what's the matter. All he said was that SpongeBob uses a little too much sauce. It's no big deal, really. But SpongeBob keeps stuttering. He can't handle even the smallest bit of criticism. Mr. Plankton, getting frustrated, asks what SpongeBob wants from him. Does he want a promotion? Suddenly, alternate universe SpongeBob's face changes back to normal. He gets excited and says, a promotion? Mr. Plankton, just wanting this to end, says, sure kid, you're on register now. He's promoting SpongeBob from fry cook to cashier. Alternate universe, SpongeBob's body literally turns into a bomb. He gasps and says, register? Then he explodes. Mr. Plankton survives the explosion and gets back to focusing on his Krabby Patties. He says he's glad that's over and kisses the same Krabby Patty again. Squidward's problem. After a bubble transition, we see alternate universe Squidward standing at the cash register. He's reading a book, trying to relax. Then he realizes that alternate universe SpongeBob is standing right next to him at the register. Alternate universe. Squidward reminds SpongeBob about that little talk they had about personal space. He's annoyed that SpongeBob is standing so close to him. But alternate universe SpongeBob says it's okay because he's official now. He points to a badge he's wearing that says co-cashier. SpongeBob has been promoted to work alongside Squidward at the cash register. Alternate universe Squidward is shocked. He says, "Wah, co-cashier?" He can't believe he now has to share his workspace with SpongeBob. Meanwhile, Mr. Plankton is sitting at a table with his two Krabby Patties. He's treating them like dinner dates. He asks the Patties, "So, have you two known each other long?" There's even a candle on the table. Suddenly, the candle goes out by itself as the door opens. Alternate universe. Squidward storms into Mr. Plankton's office. He's furious. He says Mr. Plankton can't do this to him. If Mr. Plankton thinks Squidward is going to stand out there all day listening to. The scene cuts to alternate universe SpongeBob, whose mouth splits in two while he talks complete gibberish. SpongeBob is babbling nonsense. The scene cuts back to alternate universe Squidward, who finishes his sentence. He says if Mr. Plankton thinks Squidward will put up with that, then Mr. Plankton must have coral wedged in his frontal lobe. This is Squidward's way of saying Mr. Plankton must be brain damaged to make such a terrible decision. Mr. Plankton asks what Squidward wants him to do about it. Alternate universe. Squidward says he'd like his view to be a little less yellow if Mr. Plankton knows what he means. Squidward wants SpongeBob moved away from him. The next scene shows that Mr. Plankton solved this problem in the worst possible way. Alternate universe Squidward is now the fry cook, standing in front of the grill in the kitchen. Mr. Plankton says, "Hope you like gray," as he hops off the window between the cashier stand and the grill. Mr. Plankton moved Squidward to the kitchen instead of moving SpongeBob. Alternate universe SpongeBob, still at the cash register, says, "Hey Squidward, I can see you through this little window." He's excited that he can still see Squidward. Alternate universe. Squidward just groans in frustration. More problems keep coming. Mr. Plankton heads back to his office. He says out loud that he wants no more intrusions. He'd like to begin writing the memoirs of his success story, so everyone just needs to stay away. But before he can finish his sentence, Pearl Plankton runs inside the Krusty Krab. In this alternate universe, Pearl is Mr. Plankton's daughter instead of Mr. Krabs' daughter. She's still a giant whale, so when she runs, she makes Mr. Plankton bounce up and down from the vibrations. She yells, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, daddy," and jumps up and down, making him bounce even more. Mr. Plankton tells her to just tell Daddy what she wants. He makes an oof sound from all the bouncing. He says he's very busy. Pearl Plankton asks if she could please have an advance on her allowance. She wants her allowance money early. Mr. Plankton just wants her gone. He says if it'll get her out of his antennae, she can have it. He gives Pearl a $1 bill and tells her to go crazy. Pearl looks at the single dollar and says, $1? You hate me? She begins to cry. The camera shows a close-up of her enormous tears because she's a whale. Mr. Plankton gasps when he sees how huge the tears are. He tries to dodge all of the tears falling toward him, but one drop ends up landing in his mouth. The tear is so big that it makes Mr. Plankton's body inflate into a circle shape. He falls over and says, "Ow." A customer named Alternate Universe Nat Peterson walks out of the restaurant. He's angry, and he steps on Mr. Plankton, flattening him. This squeezes all the tear water out of Mr. Plankton's body. Nat says, "You," in an accusatory tone. Mr. Plankton responds, "Me?" He doesn't know what he did wrong. Alternate Universe Nat Peterson asks if Mr. Plankton thinks this is funny. Mr. Plankton responds in a cosmic sort of way, yes. This makes Nat even angrier. Nat asks if this is how Mr. Plankton gets his sick kicks. He holds up a Krabby Patty to show Mr. Plankton. At first, it looks like a regular Krabby Patty. But the scene zooms in to show the patty is made with disgusting items like pieces of wood, an eyeball, and other gross things. Someone made this patty terribly wrong. Mr. Plankton says, "Oh my goodness, Squidward." He's yelling for Squidward because Squidward is now the fry cook who made this horrible patty. SpongeBob's meltdown. Alternate universe SpongeBob appears at the table next to Mr. Plankton. SpongeBob says he tried. He really did try his best. Mr. Plankton asks, "Oh, what now?" He's exhausted from all these problems. Alternate universe SpongeBob explains what he did wrong. A customer ordered a medium soda, and SpongeBob gave him a large soda instead. He gave him a large. SpongeBob is devastated by this tiny mistake. He says he soiled the good Krusty Krab name. Then something very strange happens to alternate universe SpongeBob. His eyes shrink, his mouth grows huge, and he starts repeatedly screaming, "Soiled it, soiled it, soiled it!" over and over again. He screams this for a very long time. Mr. Plankton commands SpongeBob to stop that. He orders SpongeBob to stop and return to his post at the cash register. Mr. Plankton pushes his hand into alternate universe SpongeBob's chest, trying to make him stop screaming. Mr. Plankton desperately asks, "Where's the off button on this thing?" Pearl Plankton walks up to Mr. Plankton again. She announces that she's decided she's going to run away. She's going to run away and find a new daddy. Mr. Plankton begs for this to stop. He yells, "Make it stop!" He can't handle running the Krusty Krab anymore. Everything is going wrong at once. The villain arrives. Suddenly, a siren horn goes off. Then everyone becomes silent, including alternate universe SpongeBob, who stops screaming, "Soiled it!" Mr. Plankton asks if he said some kind of secret word that made everyone quiet. Alternate universe SpongeBob says, "No, sir, he's back." Mr. Plankton is confused. He asks who's back. Then something red flashes by very quickly. Mr. Plankton asks, "What was that?" An alarm starts sounding. Alternate universe SpongeBob yells for everyone to man their stations. "It's a red alert!" He tells everyone to take cover. All the alternate universe customers scream and run to hide. Mr. Plankton runs in circles, panicking. He asks, "Take cover from what?" Alternate universe SpongeBob climbs up to a crow's nest, which is a lookout point high up in the restaurant. He's searching for whoever is back. He says the person is around here somewhere. Then he sees the red flash go by once again. SpongeBob yells, "There he goes!" Mr. Plankton is completely lost. He asks, "What? Who? Where? Somebody tell me." Different characters start describing who this mysterious villain is. Alternate universe. Harold says that some say he crawled out from the lowest trench in the ocean. Pearl Plankton adds that he's the saltiest of all the sea dogs. Alternate universe SpongeBob says he's the most hated creature in Bikini Bottom. The red flash bursts out of the kitchen. We finally see who it is. Krabs. In this alternate universe, Mr. Krabs is the villain instead of Plankton. Krabs is holding a Krabby Patty while swinging on a rope. He finishes the introduction by telling the audience that he's finally got a Krabby Patty. He laughs, "R, R, R, R," the naked villain. Mr. Plankton yells, "Krabs." He asks what in the barnacles is going on here. Alternate universe SpongeBob explains that this is Mr. Plankton's arch competitor, Krabs. His goal in life is to steal a Krabby Patty and ruin their restaurant. Mr. Plankton sheds a tear. He says that's terrible. Now he understands what it's like to be on the other side, having someone constantly trying to steal from you. Alternate universe SpongeBob says, "Yeah," but then he adds that the worst part is, he doesn't finish his sentence. Krabs lands behind Mr. Plankton and casts a shadow in front of alternate universe SpongeBob. The camera shows a special angle of Krabs standing behind Mr. Plankton. This is when Mr. Plankton and Razir supplies Razir Plankton. Plankton realizes something shocking. Mr. Plankton looks at Krabs and says, "Good grief, he's naked." In this alternate universe, Mr. Krabs doesn't wear any clothes at all. A part of Krabs' body even glints in the light. Krabs laughs and swings up onto a board on a support beam above everyone. He yells, "Clothe me if you can, silly landlubbers," and laughs again. He's challenging them to put clothes on him. Alternate universe SpongeBob yells that he's going to make Krabs eat those words. The cash register spins upside down and turns into a cannon. SpongeBob shoots a green shirt out of the cannon at Krabs, but Krabs dodges the shirt and runs somewhere else in the restaurant while laughing. SpongeBob yells, "No shirt, no shoes, no service." This is a reference to the signs many restaurants have. SpongeBob shoots all different types of clothes out of the cannon at Krabs. He shoots pants, shoes, jackets, and more, but all of them miss Krabs. Mr. Plankton looks at the viewers with a baffled expression, unable to understand what's happening. Krabs keeps laughing, "R, R, 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 R." But then he stops laughing suddenly. He realizes that a bra has caught him and wrapped around his body. He looks at the viewers after getting caught and says, "Huh? Aw, you got me. Well, at least it's underwire." He's making a joke about the type of bra. He throws the Krabby Patty back to Mr. Plankton and says, "Here's your stinkin' patty." The victory screech. Mr. Plankton catches the Krabby Patty. He says he doesn't understand anything that's happening. He asks if there's a gas leak in the building that's making everyone act crazy. Alternate universe SpongeBob celebrates. He says, "Knick-knack, the patty's back." "You did it, Mr. Plankton. Victory screech." SpongeBob and all the other alternate universe customers start making a loud screeching sound. Everyone is screeching except for Mr. Plankton, who just listens to all the terrible noise. Krabs tells Mr. Plankton to enjoy his victory screech because someday the Krabby Patty formula will belong to Krabs. Alternate universe SpongeBob yells at Krabs, saying he'll never get the formula, calling Krabs a twisted fiend. Krabs says, "Oh, but I will." Then he explains his plan. Even if he has to come back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Mr. Plankton's pupil starts to shrink as he listens. He begins sweating because he's getting scared. Krabs keeps saying, "and the next day, and the next day, and the next day." He leaves the Krusty Krab while walking backwards, but he keeps repeating "and the next day" over and over. He says it so many times that it becomes terrifying. Alternate universe SpongeBob hands Mr. Plankton a phone. SpongeBob says there's a phone call for Mr. Plankton. Mr. Plankton answers the phone. It's Krabs calling. Krabs is still saying, "and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day." Mr. Plankton answers that. Plankton starts sweating even more. Krabs will not stop saying this phrase, "going back home." Mr. Plankton can't take it anymore. He screams out of complete madness. Then he rips off his clothes, transforming back into the old Plankton we know. He's no longer dressed like Mr. Krabs. Plankton yells, "It's not worth it! It's just not worth it! Goodbye, everyone. I'll remember you all in therapy." This is his way of saying this experience was so traumatic that he'll need therapy to recover from it. Plankton presses the button on his body. This is the button for the Switch Lives just to know what it's like. Oh, Mogrifier machine. The machine activates and transports Plankton back to his original universe. Plankton ends up back in the Chum bucket at his table. The holographic meatloaf is sitting on the table in front of him. Plankton looks at it and says, "Holographic meatloaf? My favorite!" Plankton starts eating the holographic meatloaf. Even though it's not real food and his fork goes right through it, Plankton is happy again. He's relieved to be back in his own life where things are simple. The episode ends with Plankton content at the Chum bucket, having learned that Mr. Krabs' life isn't as great as he thought it would be. What this episode teaches us. This episode shows us an important lesson about wanting what other people have. Plankton spent years wishing he could be successful like Mr. Krabs. He thought owning the Krusty Krab would solve all his problems and make him happy. But when he actually got to experience Mr. Krabs' life, he discovered it came with many problems he never considered. As the owner of the Krusty Krab, Mr. Plankton had to deal with SpongeBob's constant need for approval and validation. He had to handle Squidward's complaints about working conditions. He had to manage Pearl's demands for money. He had to deal with angry customers when food was made incorrectly. And worst of all, he had to face a villain who would come back every single day to try to steal from him. Plankton realized that his simple life at the Chum bucket, even with its holographic food and lack of customers, was better than the constant stress of running a successful restaurant. Sometimes the grass looks greener on the other side, but when you actually get there, you find out it has its own problems. The episode also shows the difference between Plankton and Mr. Krabs as businessmen. Mr. Krabs knows how to handle difficult employees and demanding situations. Plankton completely falls apart when faced with the same challenges. This explains why Mr. Krabs is successful while Plankton continues to fail. The role reversal is also interesting because it shows what Plankton would be like if he were in Mr. Krabs' position. In the alternate universe, Mr. Krabs becomes exactly like Plankton used to be, a small villain who constantly tries to steal the Krabby Patty. This suggests that their rivalry isn't just about who they are as individuals, but about their positions as restaurant owners. The episode ends with Plankton appreciating what he has, even if it's not much. He's learned that success comes with its own set of problems, and sometimes it's better to be content with your current situation than to constantly wish for someone else's life. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Plankton's Army. Episode where Plankton recruits his family. The 25th anniversary. The episode begins with the French narrator introducing the Krusty Krab as the home of the delicious Krabby Patty and its super secret recipe. Mr. Krabs appears and calls for all hands to report immediately. He needs to talk to his crew about something important. SpongeBob runs up and announces he's reporting for duty as the fry cook. Squidward wakes up from behind the cash register where he was sleeping. He yawns and asks what all the yelling is about. Mr. Krabs explains that today is the 25th anniversary of the first time his arch-enemy Plankton ever tried to steal the secret Krabby Patty formula. This is a special day because it marks 25 years of Plankton's failures. The scene flashes back to show us Plankton's very first attempt. Young Plankton stands on a table trying to negotiate with Mr. Krabs. He simply asks if he can have the secret formula. Mr. Krabs says no. Plankton looks sad and says okay, then walks away. But Mr. Krabs tells us that Plankton was persistent. Plankton comes back and asks, "Pretty please?" Mr. Krabs just says no again. The flashback continues showing different methods Plankton tried over the years. Mr. Krabs explains that Plankton used disguises. We see Plankton laughing as he pulls a cockroach costume over himself. Mr. Krabs squishes him flat. Then Mr. Krabs mentions Plankton tried super science. Plankton drips a chemical into a test tube and drinks it. He gets surrounded by a pink cloud and transforms into an actual cockroach. Mr. Krabs steps on him again. Mr. Krabs also says Plankton tried civil disobedience. We see Plankton marching while holding a picket sign that says, "I am not a roach." Mr. Krabs squashes him once more. The flashback ends and we're back at the present-day Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs proudly announces that he always came out on top. Squidward responds sarcastically, saying, "Fascinating." Mr. Krabs warns his employees that thousands of failures have made Plankton crafty. They need to keep their eyes open. His eyes actually bulge out and move from side to side. Mr. Krabs says you never know what trick Plankton will use next to try to steal the secret Krabby Patty formula. The robot trick. Suddenly, a robot walks into the Krusty Krab. It speaks in a robotic voice and says, "What a quaint restaurant this is." The robot announces it will sample their wares. SpongeBob comments on how weird it is to see a machine made to look like a customer. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to go hose out the men's room. SpongeBob says, "With pleasure, sir," and runs off to clean the bathroom. Mr. Krabs moves Squidward out of the way and says he'll take this customer. He greets the robot and asks if he can help. The robot says yes please, and orders chili coral bits. This surprises Mr. Krabs because that's not a Krabby Patty. Mr. Krabs loses the fake grin he had on his face. He asks if the robot is sure it doesn't want a Krabby Patty instead. The robot says no thank you and holds up a dollar bill, asking if this will cover the order. Mr. Krabs says sure and grabs the dollar. He hands the robot a paper bag with the food. The robot takes the bag and walks toward the door. Using green laser beams, the robot melts the doorway and walks through. It says good day as it leaves. Mr. Krabs watches it go and says he was sure this was one of Plankton's tricks. But at least the money is good. He laughs. Then the center of the dollar bill pops open and Plankton jumps out. He yells, "Aha!" Mr. Krabs realizes he's been tricked. He says Plankton knew Mr. Krabs would never distrust a dollar. Plankton confirms this is correct. Now Mr. Krabs needs to hand over the secret Krabby Patty formula. Mr. Krabs asks, "Or what?" Plankton pauses and admits he doesn't know. He never thought he'd get this far in his plan. Mr. Krabs says, "Well then, allow him to suggest Plankton's next move." The scene cuts to a toilet being flushed. Plankton screams in terror as he slowly gets sucked down into the toilet. He yells, "Curse you, Krabs!" But his voice gets cut off as he disappears into the water pipe system. Mr. Krabs laughs and says, "Now for the chaser." The scene cuts to a manhole outside the Chum bucket. Plankton pops up out of the manhole, gasping for breath. He jumps out onto the street. Karen's suggestion. Plankton says Mr. Krabs should just wait until next time. Then he stops himself and asks who he's kidding. At least he can go home to a wife who understands him. The scene cuts to inside the Chum bucket. Karen asks Plankton to tell her what happened. Plankton says he doesn't want to talk about it. Karen tells him that talking will make him feel better. Plankton asks her to leave him alone. Karen says that's Plankton's problem. He never lets anyone in. She calls him Plankton the Rock, Plankton the Loner. Plankton responds by saying, "And she's off, ladies and gentlemen," as if Karen is starting a long speech. Karen continues talking, saying, Plankton has to do everything himself. That's why everything he tries ends up failing. Her screen shows different clips of Plankton's past failures. One clip shows Plankton laughing and about to pull a lever when Mr. Krabs crushes him. Another shows Plankton holding a rubber duck over his head when Mr. Krabs smashes him again. The most recent clip shows the toilet with a flushing noise. Plankton starts whimpering and then begins crying. He says he's a failure. Karen tells him it's not that bad. He just requires a little help. Maybe some henchmen could help him succeed. Plankton asks, "Henchmen?" Karen explains that what Plankton needs to do is surround himself with muscular tough guys who will do whatever he says. Plankton likes the sound of that. He announces he'll canvass all the seediest lowbrow dives in town to find his minions, and he knows just how to speak their language. The tough guy dive. The scene cuts to a dim club with muscular tough guys playing pool. Plankton stands at the door and tries to recruit them. He says, "Felicitations, malefactors. I am endeavoring to misappropriate the formulary for the preparation of affordable comestibles. Who will join me?" This is Plankton's attempt to sound tough and smart at the same time, but he's using such complicated words that nobody understands what he's saying. The tough guys don't respond well to this approach. The scene cuts to Plankton back at the Chum bucket. He's sitting in a wheelchair wearing a cast and bandages all over his body. He got beaten up by the tough guys. Plankton says he doesn't get it. No matter what he does, he always ends up being squashed by someone bigger than him. Karen says she thinks Plankton is overreacting. As she talks, a robotic hand comes out of a panel in her system. The hand pats Plankton gently, but then it accidentally crushes him flat. Karen says sorry. Plankton says that's okay. While he talks, he assembles himself back together like a toy. He sticks his eye back on, puts his arm in the socket, and matches his legs, which are labeled left leg and right leg, in their correct sockets. He explains that he's no different than the millions of other plankton in the sea. The plankton family has always been pushed around and stepped on. Then Plankton has a realization. He says, "Wait, that's it. Acting alone, they're powerless, but united, the Plankton family could be a real pain." He appears with a phone book and slams it on the ground. Gathering the family. Plankton explains his new plan. Mr. Krabs may think one plankton is no problem, but let's see him take on 2 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 planktons. The scene shows a montage of Plankton contacting his family members. We see Plankton jumping on phone buttons to dial numbers. We see him running from the phone receiver to the speaker. We see him writing letters to family members. We see him running while using his tongue to moisten the adhesive on envelopes. We see Plankton in a red airplane skywriting calling all plankton, but a fish on a bench sneezes and blows away the skywriting. The montage shows differently dressed Plankton family members receiving the message. Plankton says, "Why stop there?" He'll gather every family member from every corner of the ocean. The entire Plankton family will be under one roof. Mr. Krabs won't stand a chance against the staggering intellect of a million super smart criminal masterminds. The doorbell rings. Plankton gets excited and says they're here. He runs to the door and opens it with a big grin on his face. He says, "Welcome, brethren." But Plankton's grin quickly fades into a look of complete disbelief. Instead of seeing a bunch of smart criminal masterminds, he sees a huge group of hillbilly redneck family members. They're playing country music and acting like simple country folk. One of them begins to speak. His name is Clem, and he has a thick country accent. He says, "Hey look everybody, it's Cousin Plankton." All the family members except Plankton yell, "Yeehaw." Plankton looks shocked, and says to himself that he's been away from home longer than he thought. These are not the genius relatives he was expecting. Meeting the family, Clem runs up and shakes Plankton's hand enthusiastically. He says, "Well, howdy, cousin." Plankton stares at his own hand, which is now dripping wet after his cousin shook it with his sweaty hand. Plankton just says, He doesn't know what to say. Clem introduces himself and starts naming all the other family members. He lists Zeke, Rufus, Jack, Billy Bob, Billy Jim, Billy Bo, Willie Banana, Fanafo Philly, Doug, Enos, and the names keep going. He continues introducing the rest of the family while Plankton crawls on the ground in exhaustion from hearing so many names. Clem keeps talking, mentioning Julio, Fletcher McGee, Rainchild, Zeke Jr., and more. Plankton finally yells, "All right, I get it." He's had enough of hearing names. Then he suddenly becomes calm and says he means, come inside and make yourselves at home." The scene cuts to the family standing inside the chum bucket in front of Karen. Plankton introduces Karen as his computer wife. Clem whistles from the back of the group and says, "Golly, she sure is purty. Sheldon." Karen hears this and asks, "Sheldon?" Plankton looks annoyed and admits that yes, that's his first name. His full name is Sheldon J. Plankton. Karen starts cracking up laughing. She finds the name Sheldon hilarious. Plankton keeps an angry expression on his face. Karen keeps laughing and says, "Sheldon?" again. Plankton, still annoyed, tells Karen to please stop. Karen apologizes while still laughing. Plankton says all right, as he was saying, but Karen's laughter continues. Plankton admits that, okay, they all know Sheldon is a funny name. Karen says she's done laughing. No more. Plankton says good and clears his throat to continue his speech. He turns away from Karen, but he doesn't see that she brings down a screen behind him. The word Sheldon appears on the screen with an arrow pointing at Plankton. Plankton starts to say that only they can bring honor to the family name, but the family starts laughing when they see the screen. Plankton turns around to look at the screen, and it goes blank just as he looks at it. This happens several more times. Every time Plankton tries to speak, Karen puts up the word Sheldon on her screen. The family laughs, and Plankton turns around just as the screen goes blank. Plankton starts trembling with fury. Finally, when another Sheldon sign appears, Plankton quickly turns around and catches it before it disappears. He yells, "Aha!" and runs to the electrical outlet. He unplugs Karen's power cord and says that's enough. Karen manages to say, "Sheldon, haha," one more time before she loses power completely. The plan. Plankton runs in front of Karen's dark screen. He cuts to the bottom line. They're going to invade the Krusty Krab so Plankton can steal the secret formula. He asks what they think. One family member asks, "But what's in it for us?" The whole family roars in agreement with this question. They want to know what they'll get for helping. Plankton asks what they want. One family member says he'd like a new string for his banjo. He holds up a banjo that only has one string on it. Another family member asks for another boot to match the one he has. He holds up his foot, which has just one boot on it. A third family member holds up a laptop and asks for more memory for his computer. Then Clem asks about root beer. The whole family gets excited and says, "Root beer? This is what they really want." Plankton sees his opportunity. He tells them that if they help him get the secret formula, they can have as much root beer as they can drink. Plankton's family cheers loudly. Plankton announces that Victory's name is Plankton. As he turns to face the cheering crowd, we see that someone has taped a note on his back with the word Sheldon written on it. The attack. The scene cuts to the Krusty Krab. Squidward and Mr. Krabs are at the register talking. Mr. Krabs says it's almost closing time and they haven't seen eye or antennae of old Plankton for hours. Mr. Krabs thinks that this time, Plankton has finally given up. But before he can finish his sentence, Plankton's voice comes over a megaphone. Plankton announces, "Attention, Krusty Krab management. This is your better speaking." Mr. Krabs says, "What?" Plankton is standing outside the Krusty Krab with a megaphone. He announces over the megaphone that he has the restaurant surrounded. Mr. Krabs needs to give him the secret formula or Plankton will destroy the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs and Squidward run outside to confront Plankton. Mr. Krabs asks, "You and what army, bug?" Plankton chuckles and says, "What army? What army?" He tells Mr. Krabs to look around. As Plankton speaks, the camera pans out to show the Krusty Krab surrounded by something green covering the ground. Mr. Krabs asks, "You planted grass?" He thinks the green stuff is just grass. Plankton says, "Grass?" and starts laughing like a maniac. His family joins in the laughter. Mr. Krabs realizes what's happening and says, "Uh-oh. The green covering isn't grass at all. It's thousands of tiny Plankton family members surrounding the restaurant." Mr. Krabs and Squidward scream and run into the Krusty Krab. The Plankton family chases them inside. The screen goes black and we only hear the Krusty Krab shaking with thudding noises, as if a big fight is happening. Stuck in the toilet. The scene cuts to show Mr. Krabs' face. He's stuck in a toilet with only his head exposed above the water. Squidward is also stuck inside the toilet bowl. They're both surrounded by Plankton family members. Mr. Krabs tells Plankton he'll never get away with this. Plankton says Mr. Krabs is right. The pipes are much too narrow to fit through. Besides, what Plankton really wants is the Krabby Patty formula. Mr. Krabs says Plankton might as well forget it. The formula is locked away in his safe, and Mr. Krabs will never give him the combination. He laughs. Plankton tells him to be silent. He jumps on the flushing lever, and the toilet flushes. Mr. Krabs spins around in the water, and his eyes get all tangled up. Plankton says he thinks they'll find his family is more than capable of figuring out the combination themselves. Plankton snaps his finger, and his family members assemble themselves into the shape of a giant human hand and ear. They work together to twist the safe's lock and figure out the combination. Plankton gives them instructions, telling them to turn it a little to the left. Mr. Krabs yells, "Curse you, Plankton, and your ability to join together to form a working human ear." The family opens the safe. Inside is the secret formula, which is a book labeled "Recipe for a Krabby Patty" inside a bottle. Reading the formula, Plankton gets excited and says, "Hot dog." He hops up the stairs to the formula. He celebrates that yes, it's his. The formula is his. After all these years, it's finally his. Plankton pulls the cork from the bottle and smells it like it's expensive champagne. He pulls the formula book out of the bottle. He makes an announcement that on this day, he, Sheldon J. Plankton, single-handedly overthrew the Krusty Krab. His family members clear their throats. They're annoyed that Plankton is taking all the credit. Plankton notices his cousins look upset. He quickly adds that, of course, he had a little help from the family. Plankton goes back to Mr. Krabs, who is still stuck in the toilet. Mr. Krabs says, "Plankton, wait. You can't look at the formula." Plankton assumes Mr. Krabs is begging, but Mr. Krabs says he's not begging. He's telling Plankton that he won't be able to handle the truth. There are some things in this world that weren't meant for mortal eyes. Plankton corrects him, saying eye, because Plankton only has one eye. Mr. Krabs repeats eye to match Plankton's correction. Plankton says he doesn't care. He asks for a drum roll. He gives himself a snare drum roll on a drum, then runs to Mr. Krabs' desk. Plankton says that finally, after all these years, he's about to find out what makes a Krabby Patty taste so good. He opens the book. The secret recipe for one Krabby Patty starts with a pinch of salt. Mr. Krabs yells for Plankton to wait. Plankton turns the page. It says 3 teaspoons of chopped onions. Mr. Krabs warns him to stop. Plankton turns the page again. It says a cup of love. Mr. Krabs yells, "Don't do it!" Plankton continues reading. The recipe says mix together with the most important ingredient of all, 4 heaping pounds of freshly ground. Plankton turns the final page. It has a picture of Plankton himself on it. The ingredient is plankton. The recipe calls for 4 heaping pounds of freshly ground plankton. Plankton stares wide-eyed at the formula and looks at Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs says, "I warned ya." The escape? Plankton screams as loud as he can and runs away from the Krusty Krab. He inhales and screams again. He inhales and screams yet another time. His family hears about what's in the recipe. Back in the Krusty Krab, the book falls on the ground. The Plankton family reads the recipe and everyone gasps. They all run away screaming in total terror. Mr. Krabs laughs at them running away. But one family member, Clem, just stands there staring at the book. Mr. Krabs asks why Clem isn't running. Clem explains that he can't read. Mr. Krabs tells him to get out of there anyway. Clem runs away, laughing in a goofy way. Mr. Krabs gets himself out of the toilet. Squidward comes out of the toilet too. He wasn't murdered by Plankton's army after all. He's alive and just rubs his head. SpongeBob arrives at the scene. He asks if he missed anything. The real formula. Squidward picks up the formula book from the floor. He asks Mr. Krabs if this is really the secret ingredient for the Krabby Patty. Mr. Krabs says of course not. He points toward the Chum bucket and explains that Plankton will probably figure that out. Plankton will be back again to find out what the real formula is. But Mr. Krabs tells them not to worry. The formula is safe from harm. He has it hidden in his most secret hiding place. It's a place no one, not even Plankton, would ever figure out. Mr. Krabs starts laughing and hopping up and down. Squidward makes a guess. He says the formula is at Mr. Krabs' home, under his mattress. Mr. Krabs gasps. He realizes Squidward just guessed the correct hiding place. Mr. Krabs runs toward his house while screaming, "Curse you, Squidward!" The episode ends with this joke about how Mr. Krabs' secret hiding place isn't very secret at all. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Bucket Sweet Bucket, the episode where SpongeBob and Patrick renovate the Chum Bucket S, the rundown Chum Bucket. The episode begins at the Chum Bucket. Plankton opens the kitchen doors and sees how dirty and rundown the dining room is. The camera pans across the messy space. Plankton says the place might as well be a mausoleum. It's terrible. At least the building is structurally sound, he says. But then the door falls right on top of him. He tries to get it off and says, forget this. He's sick of not having any business. Karen appears and suggests Plankton should fix this rust bucket up. She tells him to look around. There's chipping paint, and a piece of the wall comes off to reveal the damage underneath. The plumbing is bad, and we see very dirty pipes. There are dust bunnies, and an actual bunny made of dust blows away. Karen says it's no wonder Plankton doesn't have any customers. Plankton says, okay, he gets it. It's time to give this place a complete overhaul. The scene cuts to outside the Chum bucket, where Plankton is dragging a blue paint bucket. He almost falls into the bucket. He grabs a paintbrush but has trouble painting the building because the paintbrush is way too large for someone his size. Plankton says he shouldn't have to subject himself to such basic labor. He screams and falls off the bucket with the paintbrush handle in his mouth. He sits up, spits it out, and coughs. He says this is a job for an imbecile. Then he sees Patrick and SpongeBob laughing while playing leapfrog together, tricking SpongeBob and Patrick. Plankton says, or two imbeciles, and laughs. He walks over to SpongeBob and Patrick just before SpongeBob is about to leap. Plankton says, excuse me, gentlemen. He's sorry to bother them, but he's having trouble with his home. He starts to tear up and sheds a tear. Plankton explains he would like to paint the Chum bucket to please his wife. But sadly, his arms shrivel up as he wipes a tear, and he's too small and feeble to do the work. SpongeBob says they can help Plankton. He asks Patrick if that's okay. Patrick says yes and mentions he came prepared. He holds up a watermelon and sticks his head inside it like a helmet. Patrick says he's ready and holds up a paintbrush. The scene cuts to later. Plankton tells the boys that Karen wants this place to really sparkle. He was thinking it could use a little more pizzazz. Sparkle dust appears when Plankton says the word pizzazz. SpongeBob and Patrick repeat pizzazz, yeah. Plankton gets a new idea. He suggests they paint the entire Chum bucket. SpongeBob and Patrick say, whoa, really? Plankton says yes. He needs their artistic vision. He asks if they would want to disappoint his Karen. SpongeBob and Patrick both say no, sir. Patrick shakes his head. Plankton tells them to hop to it. SpongeBob and Patrick salute and say yes, sir, then start painting the Chum bucket. Squidward joins in. The scene cuts to Squidward walking with headphones so he can listen to music. He's doing a heel-toe walk pattern. He notices SpongeBob and Patrick painting the Chum bucket. They're singing about how they love to work. Squidward asks what this mess is. He walks to SpongeBob, who is painting the wrong way. SpongeBob greets Squidward and shows him that Mr. Plankton is having them paint. He calls it pizzazz and makes sparkle dust that lands on Squidward. Squidward says, pizzazz, huh? As SpongeBob slides down the ladder with paint everywhere. Squidward asks what SpongeBob would know about pizzazz. Patrick appears, also covered in paint. He says Plankton told them he needs their artistic vision. SpongeBob says they should show Squidward their vision. They paint each other very quickly. Squidward calls them buffoons and says they wouldn't know artistic vision if it hit them over the head. He asks where the paintbrush is and takes a blue one. He'll show them what artistic vision is all about. You start with light brush strokes, he says, and paints a little on the Chum bucket. SpongeBob and Patrick say, oh, and start lightly painting each other. Squidward says that's perfect and keeps painting while calling them simpletons. As the three keep painting, the camera pans over to Plankton, who watches what's happening. He says it's amazing that he didn't even have to trick the tall one, meaning Squidward. His plan is falling right into place. With those three idiots busy, stealing the formula will be easy. Plankton heads to the Krusty Krab, but SpongeBob stops him, taking things from the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob calls for Mr. Plankton. He's got green paint all over his face. He says all this hard work is making them thirsty. Could they get a drink? Plankton says he'll show SpongeBob something. He opens the doors and says he wishes he could offer them a cold drink for their hard work. They both walk toward the very messy pipes, but sadly, his pipes are rusted shut. SpongeBob breaks the stiff liquid and says he sees what Plankton means. Plankton starts to say if only there was some way he could fix this, but he notices SpongeBob is gone. SpongeBob is outside singing. Plankton laughs. SpongeBob goes into the Krusty Krab basement and takes out some pipes, which cause a leak. He takes a pipe out of one of his pores, which pushes his brain out. The brain slides back down to one of SpongeBob's top pores. Now feeling better with his brain back, he gets another pipe out of his side pore. He collects 2 pipes from under the water. Plankton walks up to the Krusty Krab doors laughing. He says the secret formula, here he comes. He opens the door and a bunch of water streams out at him. Plankton screams. SpongeBob walks back to the Chum bucket carrying lots of pipes. Plankton says perfect, but then spots a problem with Squidward. Squidward is back in his normal shirt and is painting a picture of himself on the Chum bucket. Plankton climbs up the ladder and jumps on Squidward's head. He yells no 3 times. It's all wrong. He asks if Squidward knows anything about art. Plankton takes the brush and starts painting. He paints a log cabin and bluegrass music plays. Squidward asks, a log cabin? Plankton says yeah and throws the paintbrush away. He just thinks log cabins are so cozy. Now that's what you call art, he says, and jumps off Squidward's head. Squidward says everyone's a critic. Plankton walks back toward the Krusty Krab, saying he can't wait to see Mr. Krabs' face when he discovers that Plankton has stolen the secret Krabby Patty formula. But SpongeBob stops him again. SpongeBob asks what Plankton thinks of the new window. They got it from the Krusty Krab. The window is square and placed high up. Plankton asks how he's supposed to see out of a window that high. SpongeBob says he hadn't thought about that. Patrick says he did think about it. He installed a round window near the ground. He tells Plankton to look, saying it's the perfect height for someone his size. Plankton and SpongeBob walk to Patrick. Plankton says, see, SpongeBob should learn from Patrick. Patrick is using his brain. He knows Plankton will actually want to see out the window. But then Plankton notices the window is showing just a blank wall. Patrick says, wait, you wanted to see out the window? Weird. Plankton's breakdown. Plankton snaps. He unscrews a bolt from the window, puts it between his teeth, and growls with extreme rage. Then he breaks the bolt with his teeth. Plankton yells, asking if they can't do anything right. He gives them one simple task after another. Then he starts tearing up and crying. He says to just forget it. It was foolish to think this plan would ever work, when nothing else in his life has worked out. He looks up at them and lists his failures. Telemarketing, lifeguarding, creative writing. All bitter failures. He curls up by SpongeBob's shoe and cries. SpongeBob picks up Plankton and says, it's okay, little green creature. Patrick and SpongeBob are going to keep working on the Chum bucket until it's the most pizzazziest restaurant in Bikini Bottom. Sparkle Dust appears again. Plankton asks, really? While crying. SpongeBob says, absolutely. He tells everyone to come do some interior decorating. Squidward says goodbye to his paintbrush and throws it away. He says hello to Antique Finishes. SpongeBob and Patrick run to the Krusty Krab, with SpongeBob accidentally dropping Plankton. Plankton falls face first on the floor and feels dizzy. He says, well, that should keep them busy for a while. Moving everything. The scene cuts to later. SpongeBob and Patrick are taking apart the arch on the side of the Krusty Krab. They chant, hup 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 as they work. They throw the arch up, and it comes back down on their bodies. They carry it over to the Chum bucket while Plankton goes to the Krusty Krab. They keep chanting as they work. Plankton says he just needs to sneak past Mr. Krabs and he's home free. SpongeBob and Patrick take the doors of the Krusty Krab off and carry them away. Plankton walks inside, but when he hides behind a table, SpongeBob and Patrick take that table too. Plankton hides in the boat behind the cash register. He wonders where that stingy crab could be. SpongeBob and Patrick take the boat and cash register with them. Plankton laughs as he hides behind the grill, but SpongeBob and Patrick take the grill to the Chum bucket too. Plankton goes into Mr. Krabs' office and says he still doesn't see him. SpongeBob and Patrick take Mr. Krabs' desk. Plankton gasps when he sees the safe. He says he's in the clear. He squeezes inside the safe and has a lantern to see. He finds the secret formula and says it's beautiful. He tears up but tells himself no tears, not yet. There's work to be done. He unscrews the bottle top and holds up the secret formula, laughing. At long last, he has it. A black and white crowd appears and applauds. Plankton reads what the secret formula says. 1 bottle of molting lotion. Take passport photo. Get new safe travel size. He looks confused. This isn't the secret formula. It's a to-do list. Plankton screams in fury and tears it up. He turns into a little green Hulk and bursts out of the safe. When he comes out, there's nothing but the safe left. The big reveal. Plankton asks what happened to the Krusty Krab. He gasps and asks what happened to the Chum bucket. It's revealed that the Chum bucket has turned into a replica of the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob and Patrick are on the roof with hammers. Plankton yells curses. This isn't what he meant by renovation. SpongeBob says he knows, but isn't it great? It looks just like the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs steps out of a taxi with suitcases and a hat on. He says it looks more like Plankton trying to steal his restaurant. SpongeBob says Mr. Krabs has returned from vacation. The word exposition appears above SpongeBob's head to make fun of how obvious this is. Mr. Krabs says it's time for the Krusty Krab to return from its vacation too. He goes to the back of the building and pushes the entire Krusty Krab over to its original spot. Then he flips it to have the doors face the street. SpongeBob says hooray and Patrick says yay. Mr. Krabs takes the safe out from his throat. It's covered with saliva. He pulls out the real formula for the patties and says he bets Plankton tried to steal this too. Plankton chuckles and says, well, steal is such a strong word. Mr. Krabs grabs him by the side of his eye. Plankton screams in pain. Mr. Krabs asks if Plankton really thought he'd leave the secret formula behind when going on vacation. Mr. Krabs starts to say his usual line, and Plankton joins in. They both say, stay away from me, and then Plankton finishes with restaurant bug. Plankton says he thinks they've been through this before. He'll do the honors himself. Plankton throws himself back toward where the chum bucket used to be, but he doesn't scream like he normally does. He lets out a blank, expressionless, monotone scream. He lands face first on the ground. Karen says in an upset voice that Plankton did an excellent job. He really fixed the place up. Her voice is sarcastic. Plankton's voice is muffled because his face is on the ground. He tells Karen not to nag him. He's had a long day. The ending. The scene cuts to later at the Krusty Krab, which now has new decorations. Mr. Krabs tells Squidward he really outdid himself with the new look. He asks where Squidward got the fountain. Squidward says he sculpted it out of the concrete foundation of the chum bucket. Mr. Krabs asks about all the metal decorations. Squidward says those were all made from the chum bucket walls. Mr. Krabs asks about the computer, and we see SpongeBob playing solitaire on it. Squidward explains that's Plankton's wife Karen. Mr. Krabs says it looks great and it didn't cost him a dime. A customer walks up looking unpleased. He says $25 for a Krabby Patty is a ripoff. Not cool. Mr. Krabs says the customer is paying for the enhanced ambiance. The customer says that's true. It is pretty classy in the restaurant now. He changes to a happy expression and says he'll take 4 Krabby Patties. The episode ends with this joke about Mr. Krabs charging more money because of the fancy new decorations. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Chum Bucket Supreme, the episode, where Patrick creates a slogan, "No customers again." The episode opens at the Chum Bucket. Plankton holds up 2 different napkin designs and asks Karen which one is better. Karen says if she had eyes, she'd be rolling them right now. Plankton responds sarcastically, thanking her for the help. He says details like this can be very important to customers. Karen asks, customers? What customers? Plankton looks at a screen and sees a car in the parking lot. He points out those customers who just pulled up. He zips outside on top of Karen with a blue tablecloth. He greets them and welcomes them to the Chum Bucket. He asks if they'd like seating inside or outside. A customer named Pilar asks, seating for what? Plankton gets angry and says for the Chum Bucket, where they can enjoy a nice helping of chum. He pretends to eat it enthusiastically, hiding it behind his head while saying how good the chum is. A customer named Nat asks if people actually eat chum. Plankton yells, asking if they're going to eat or not. Nat says, yeah, he'll have 2 Krabby Patties. Pilar also orders 2. Nat explains they couldn't find parking over at the Krusty Krab. The scene shows the Krusty Krab parking lot completely jam-packed with cars. The 2 customers walk away. Plankton bursts water from his head, then drinks it and sighs. He asks what he was saying. Oh, right. He remembers. He angrily rips up the menu and stomps on it. He yells that he's tired of the Krusty Krab taking all his business. They're doomed. He starts crying. Karen asks why he doesn't do what all good business owners do. Plankton, still crying, asks what that would be. Karen says to advertise his product, of course. She gives Plankton part of the cloth. The advertising attempt. Plankton says advertising and stops crying. He can't believe it took him so long to come up with this idea. Karen sighs because it was her idea, not his. Plankton starts digging in a box of letters. He's looking for specific letters to make a sign. He finds a Q, no. Then a P, no. Finally, he finds an L. He puts together a sign that says, Chum is metabolic fuel. Plankton says it's perfect and that he really did it this time. He calls himself Old Planky and starts dancing and singing about his genius. Patrick walks up and begins reading the slogan. While this happens, Plankton stops dancing and looks down at Patrick. Patrick tries to sound out the words slowly. He says, Chum is, and then tries to read metabolic. He sips from a cup while struggling with the word. The scene cuts inside Patrick's head. His brain is literally on fire. 3 mini versions of Patrick's brain are panicking. One says to forget about what that word means because there's a fire breaking out in the language part of the brain. Another says they need to get out. One mini Patrick pushes on a door that has signs saying pull to open. A third mini Patrick says the door is jammed. They tell him to push harder. All of them start coughing. Patrick's head starts to smoke on the outside. Plankton notices and tells Patrick his head is on fire. Patrick jumps. Plankton tells him to use the drink to put it out. Patrick stares at the cup and says it's kelp juice, asking if Plankton wants some. Plankton takes the drink from Patrick and throws it at Patrick's head. Patrick yells, asking what kind of friend Plankton is. Plankton says, "Friend? I didn't even know you." But Patrick interrupts and tells him to go ahead and say sorry. Plankton says he's sorry, though he sounds confused. Patrick says okay. He forgives him. Patrick also apologizes for yelling. Then Patrick asks if he can tell Plankton something honestly. Plankton just says whatever. Patrick says it's about the sign. These words make his head sad. We see inside Patrick's head crying and saying it doesn't get it. Patrick tells his head it's okay, he doesn't get it either. Patrick's solution. Plankton calls Patrick a freak show and tells him to wait. In a few minutes, this sign will attract more customers than Patrick can count. The French narrator says, a few minutes later, Patrick asks what that number before 1 is. Plankton says 0. Patrick says, oh right, congratulations on having 0 customers. Plankton says, okay, so it may take a little longer than a few minutes. The French narrator says, a little longer than a few minutes later. Patrick asks what they're doing again. Plankton gets angry. While Plankton is distracted, Patrick switches the letters around on the sign. Patrick says, there we go, and announces, Chum is fun. But when Plankton looks, he sees the sign says, Chum is fun because Patrick mixed up the letters. Plankton asks what happened. Patrick changed his sign to say, Chum is fun. That's the dumbest thing Plankton has ever heard. Patrick says the customers seem to think it's interesting. He points to show a bunch of customers coming into the Chum bucket. Plankton realizes that apparently, dumb sells Chum. He believes he's just found his new advertising director. Patrick chews off a bit of a letter R. Mr. Krabs notices. After a bubble transition, we're at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs screams because he only has 2 customers. Customers are looking scarce. He nervously suggests it must be low tide or something. Squidward says they've all gone to the Chum bucket. Mr. Krabs repeats, the Chum bucket? In shock. He looks through binoculars and reads the sign above the Chum bucket door. It says Chum is fun. He calls for SpongeBob. SpongeBob asks what Mr. Krabs needs. Mr. Krabs says they have a situation. SpongeBob says he's on it and runs off. SpongeBob pulls a lever which activates a situation alert system. This triggers an elaborate sequence where Mr. Krabs gets pulled to his office and SpongeBob goes through a complex series of tubes and doors. SpongeBob counts down from 5 to 1 as different numbered doors open. Finally, SpongeBob arrives where Mr. Krabs is waiting. Mr. Krabs says their worst fears have been realized. SpongeBob gasps and asks if Goofy Goober is going non-dairy. Mr. Krabs says no and pulls down a screen. SpongeBob says, ooh, slideshow. Mr. Krabs shows slides explaining the situation. A few hours ago, the Chum bucket was a desolate wasteland as it should be, but now there are customers outside. There's only one way Plankton could have changed things so quickly. The slide shows Plankton sneaking past SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs says Plankton must have slipped into the Krusty Krab while SpongeBob wasn't looking. SpongeBob notices those are his legs in the picture. Mr. Krabs changes the slide to show Plankton stealing the secret formula. A slide of SpongeBob screaming is displayed next. SpongeBob screams, Mr. Krabs says he thought SpongeBob would say that. The final slide shows them sneaking to the Chum bucket. They need to infiltrate the Chum bucket and steal the formula back. The infiltration. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs dress in a brown jacket with a clam on top. Mr. Krabs stands on top of SpongeBob while SpongeBob struggles to keep his balance. This is their disguise. Mr. Krabs asks how SpongeBob is holding up. SpongeBob says not so good. Mr. Krabs tells him to hold on because they're almost there. The French narrator says 2 hours later, they finally make it inside. Mr. Krabs says they made it and they're in. Customers are saying Chum is fun to each other. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. SpongeBob, still struggling under Mr. Krabs' weight, points to a door. The camera shows a door with 2 signs covering windows that say Top Secret and Stay Out. Mr. Krabs says bingo and tells SpongeBob to giddy up. They open the door, but Plankton immediately runs up to them. Plankton says excuse me, but before he can continue, Mr. Krabs quickly closes the door. Plankton asks if they'd like a free sample. Mr. Krabs says no in a fake high voice, claiming he's full. Plankton says okay, but how about his little friend? He says hi to SpongeBob. SpongeBob starts to say he doesn't want a free sample, but Plankton stuffs the chum in SpongeBob's mouth. Plankton yells to look out because she's gonna blow. The disguise expands and the camera cuts outside to show an explosion. When we return, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are out of their disguise. SpongeBob is scrubbing his tongue, trying to get rid of the chum taste. Mr. Krabs realizes Plankton obviously didn't steal the formula, so how did he steal all the customers? A customer says the chum tastes awful. Another agrees but says the slogan is so catchy they can't stop eating it. Both customers say, Chum is fum, and then throw up. Plankton laughs about the slogan working. Mr. Krabs grabs SpongeBob by the tongue and they leave. Patrick's new slogans. Plankton goes to check on his advertising guru. He walks into the top secret room and asks what brilliant slogans Patrick has come up with this week, but he finds Patrick sleeping. Patrick wakes up confused. Plankton says Patrick is supposed to be coming up with witty catchphrases to keep the customers happy. Plankton jumps onto an easel and looks at Patrick's work. Every single poster just says, "Chum is fum," over and over. Some sheets have it written multiple times. One sheet has the words arranged in the shape of Patrick's body. Separate sheets just say, "Chum is" and "fum." Plankton says, "Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it." He tells Patrick to keep up the good work and leaves. Patrick says, "You got it, boss." Plankton opens the door to the crowd and announces, "Chum is fum." The crowd cheers. After a bubble transition, we see a line of customers that goes all the way outside the Chum bucket. Plankton shows Karen something. Every time he makes a sale, the cash register sound goes to a microphone and plays through 3 loudspeakers on top of the Chum bucket. Mr. Krabs hears this from across the street and cries. Karen asks how that's going to help boost sales. Plankton says Karen doesn't need help when you have a catchy slogan like his. Karen warns him not to look now, but his catchy slogan days are numbered. Plankton turns around and looks at the customers. Customers are complaining. One says the Chum sounds not right. Another agrees, saying they keep saying "Chum is fum," but it's just not working anymore. They throw their food on the floor and leave. The new slogan. After a bubble transition, Patrick is sleeping again. Plankton yells his name and Patrick wakes up startled. Plankton says they're having a board meeting and need ideas. Patrick examines a graph and says he thinks he sees the problem. Plankton's potty has a shocky thing in it. Plankton yells, "That's not it. They need a new slogan." Patrick needs to come up with another genius catchphrase like "Chum is fum, but different." Patrick says he's got it. The French narrator says, 3 days later. The scene shows outside the Chum bucket with an even longer line of customers. The new sign reads, "Fum is Chum." Customers say they're happy the old tired slogan got changed. The new slogan, "Fum is Chum," is way cooler. They eat the Chum and throw up into buckets. Plankton gives Chum to a customer and tells Patrick he really earned that promotion. Patrick is washing dishes and thanks his boss. Plankton says nothing can stop him now. A montage shows Plankton's success. People eating Chum, billboards with the new slogan, Plankton on the cover of a restaurant magazine, many cars parked outside, and a local hockey team lining up for food. The downfall. Patrick hands Plankton a resignation slip. He's quitting. Plankton says, but Patrick is his whole marketing department. Patrick says he knows, but he's burned out. He turns around to show the back of his head literally has a burned hole in it. Patrick says Plankton can send his paycheck to his home. Plankton asks, "Check?" He crumples up the resignation letter and throws it away. He yells that Patrick wants money for those stupid catchphrases. Anybody can sell to his idiot customers. Plankton accidentally says this over the loudspeakers. The customers hear everything. Plankton calls them buffoons and morons. They'll buy anything he sells them. They're the dumbest of the dumb. Customers start getting angry and throwing away their Chum. Plankton calls them the stupidest of the stupid. Dummies, dweebs, and other insults. The hockey team stops eating and approaches Plankton. He notices them and says, "Uh-oh." A hockey player asks what that part about insults was. Plankton screams while the hockey players beat him up. They kick him out of the Chum bucket. One player picks Plankton up and puts him on a hockey tee. Plankton asks if it's too late to say sorry. He gets hit like a hockey puck. The hockey player notices a new sign at the Krusty Krab and asks who's hungry. The hockey players cheer and run to the Krusty Krab, leaving Plankton squished. At the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs they're back in business. Mr. Krabs agrees and yells at Patrick to keep up the good work. Patrick, now working for the Krusty Krab, paints a banner that says, "Krabby Patties are fum." The episode ends with this joke showing Patrick took his slogan idea to Mr. Krabs instead. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Single Cell Anniversary, the episode where Plankton forgets his anniversary, coming home smelling like failure. The episode opens with a shot of the Chum bucket. The camera cuts to inside Plankton's lab, where Karen is attached to the wall. We zoom into a small entrance with a button, outlet, and tiny coat hanger. A panel slides up, revealing an exhausted Plankton wearing a hat and carrying a briefcase. He enters, and the panel automatically closes. Plankton sighs and walks over to hang up his hat. Karen speaks right when he's about to hang it, asking if that's him and welcoming him home. Plankton mutters to himself as he hangs his hat and puts down his briefcase. When he removes his hat, a green odor comes from him and floats toward holes in the ceiling above Karen's monitor. Karen asks how his day was, then smells the odor through the ceiling holes. She coughs as an alarm sounds. She asks what that smell is and closes the holes. Plankton explains that the smell Karen mentions is the stench of failure. The word failure becomes visible in the stench cloud, which whispers the word. Plankton says the smell of defeat penetrates his soul so deeply that his very skin is covered with its foul stench. He sighs and starts to walk away, then pauses and says thanks for asking in a sarcastic tone. Karen says it smells horrible and Plankton can't come in smelling like that. She grabs him with one of her robotic arms. Plankton asks what she's doing. Karen holds him up to an air duct which vacuums off his skin, leaving him pink and in his underwear. Plankton looks at himself and screams a very high-pitched scream, then covers himself. Karen starts moving him somewhere else. Plankton tells her to stop, but Karen puts him into a bucket of water next to a mop, creating a big splash and bubbles. She takes him out. Plankton gasps for air and tries to command her to stop. Karen puts him back in the bucket a second time. She takes him out again and holds up a scrub brush with another robotic arm. Plankton moves his legs like he's trying to run away. Karen scrubs him with the brush and puts him in the bucket a third time. When she takes him out, she blows a hairdryer at him while he screams. She grabs a new pair of skin from a rack and puts it on him while he sits on a stool. Karen holds up a mirror and buffs him with pink powder, creating a large dust cloud. When the dust clears, Plankton is clean with a SpongeBob-like happy look on his face. The forgotten anniversary. Karen asks if he feels better now. Plankton looks in the mirror and says although he looks good, it's not enough to hide the ugliness he feels inside. Karen asks if she missed a spot and scrubs inside his mouth with the brush. Plankton gets very frustrated and veins appear on his body. Karen tells him not to blow a gasket because today is a special day. Plankton's veins disappear and he asks what special day. Karen says they're celebrating his biggest accomplishment ever. Plankton smiles and asks if he really accomplished something. What is it? Karen says it has something to do with him asking a certain someone to spend the rest of her life with him. Plankton looks confused. Karen sighs and speaks faster while showing a gold ring on her robotic hand. She says they each wear rings in memory of this moment. Plankton looks at a gold ring around his arm. He moves his arm behind his back and in front again, making the ring disappear like a magic trick. He says enough with the riddles and to just tell him what this proud moment is. Karen calls him a selfish green twit. It's their wedding anniversary. Plankton sounds disappointed and says, "Oh, that." He sarcastically makes a noisemaker motion with his finger and says, "Yippee," before walking away. Karen sobs and says he forgot. She got him the perfect gift and holds out a bottle with a piece of paper and pink bow inside. Plankton screeches to a halt and turns around. He sees it's the Krabby Patty formula and immediately perks up. He jumps onto the bottle and kisses it twice, asking how Karen got it. Karen explains she went to the Krusty Krab. The camera shows a flashback where Karen, who is portable now, rolls up to the order window. She orders one Krabby Patty. Squidward hands her a plate with a patty on it. Karen picks it up and pushes what she can into a slot on her side. Her screen displays the words "Secret Formula" with a picture of a Krabby Patty. She sucks in the rest, prints out the formula on paper, and puts it in a bottle. She thanks Squidward and rolls away. Squidward just says, "Whatever." The camera fades back to Plankton still kissing the bottle. He says, "What? Sorry, I wasn't listening." He jumps down holding the formula and says Karen can tell him later. He starts to walk away with it. Karen takes the bottle away and says Plankton doesn't get this until he gets her a gift. Plankton groans. Karen adds it must be from his heart. Plankton sighs and walks to the entrance. The door opens automatically. He grabs his hat, gives Karen one last look, and leaves. SpongeBob helps out. After a bubble transition, we see SpongeBob and Squidward walking together. SpongeBob is telling a story about getting his head stuck in the fry vat. Squidward says the story gets better every time, but SpongeBob interrupts by lifting his hands and knocking Squidward to the ground. SpongeBob asks if Squidward heard that sound. It sounds like despair. Squidward says that was probably him. SpongeBob says no, not bitterness but despair. It's coming from over this way. He goes down on the ground and sniffs like a dog, finding Plankton groaning. SpongeBob asks what's wrong. Plankton says there's nothing wrong, then starts crying and says he's fine. SpongeBob tells him to open up to Uncle SpongeBob. Plankton explains it's nothing, just that today is his wedding anniversary. SpongeBob asks what present Plankton bought his wife. Plankton admits he didn't buy Karen anything. SpongeBob gasps and announces they have a love emergency. The words appear on screen with a heart. He yells through a megaphone that there's a love emergency and asks everyone to stand back. The Bikini Bottom citizens look at him awkwardly. SpongeBob tells Plankton there's only one thing to do. He needs to give Karen a present from his heart, putting his hand over his own heart. Plankton asks if he means like a kidney. SpongeBob says no, from the heart, where love grows. Plankton asks, "My what?" SpongeBob says his love. They go back and forth with Plankton mispronouncing the word love as louve, loop, and lump. SpongeBob breaks it down slowly, teaching Plankton to say the word. Finally, Plankton says it correctly. SpongeBob says Plankton has taken his first steps into the Hall of Love. He asks Plankton to tell him more about Karen. Learning about love. After a bubble transition, they're in SpongeBob's library. SpongeBob asks what Plankton's favorite thing to do with Karen is. Plankton says they like taking long walks on the beach and talking about their dreams. Their dreams of conquering Bikini Bottom, becoming supreme overlords, and trampling their enemies beneath their feet. He laughs evilly. SpongeBob writes down trampling enemies on a notepad. He asks Plankton to tell him about Karen. Plankton describes Karen's technical specifications, mentioning her computer parts and how she processes data. SpongeBob asks if Karen has any hobbies. Plankton says she makes a lot of beeping sounds. SpongeBob finds this interesting and asks if she ever goes ding. Plankton says now that SpongeBob mentions it, she does go ding at least once a day. SpongeBob writes this down and says Karen must be a music lover. The solution is that Plankton needs to serenade her. Plankton says he can't sing. SpongeBob says not to worry, and when finished, Plankton will be as golden-voiced as him. After a bubble transition, they're outside SpongeBob's pineapple. SpongeBob tells Plankton to repeat after him and sings a vocal exercise. Plankton clears his throat and tries to copy SpongeBob. He holds one note for an extremely long time. The scene cuts to Squidward drinking something in his lawn chair. The long note makes Squidward's glass crack, then shatter, splashing drink in his face. The note continues as Sandy walks by. Her helmet cracks and shatters. She holds her breath and runs away. Plankton finally finishes. SpongeBob picks him up and says he's ready. Plankton asks what he should sing. SpongeBob says when the time comes, Plankton will know. The music Karen loves comes from inside. Plankton asks why SpongeBob is obsessed with his internal organs. The serenade. After another bubble transition, SpongeBob and Plankton walk into the Chum bucket. SpongeBob says this is it. Plankton says he doesn't think he's ready. SpongeBob says he just has butterflies in his tummy. Plankton says no, he's just nervous and doesn't know what flying insects have to do with it. SpongeBob laughs and opens the door, telling Plankton to get in there and sing. Plankton walks in. He clears his throat and calls for Karen. Karen asks where her present is. Plankton says he has it, right in his kidney, he means heart. He clears his throat and pulls out maracas. Plankton starts singing and dancing a song about Karen. He mentions her computer parts and components in the lyrics. SpongeBob and Patrick appear playing guitar and drums, both dressed in Mexican clothing. They join in as Plankton continues the song. When it ends, Plankton, SpongeBob, and Patrick bow. Karen sniffles and says that was so beautiful. Plankton asks if she really liked it. Karen says she loved it, but not as much as she loves Plankton. Plankton says he loves her too. Bikini Bottom citizens, including SpongeBob, rush in and say, "Aw." Then Plankton asks if he can have his present now. Karen says of course, and announces she's loading the Krabby Patty formula. SpongeBob suddenly gasps when he realizes what's happening. He says they're such a lovely couple, then realizes Karen is loading the formula. Plankton laughs and tells SpongeBob that by helping him woo his computer wife, SpongeBob just doomed the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob says he has to stop it before it's too late. The formula crisis. Karen announces 45% loaded. SpongeBob presses several buttons on a keyboard, trying Control-Alt-Delete. Karen says 55% loaded. SpongeBob smashes the keyboard asking how to turn this thing off. Plankton tells him to get his hands off his wife. Karen says 65% loaded. SpongeBob gasps and notices the plug. Plankton also gasps. SpongeBob says Plankton loses. Plankton sarcastically says, "Oh no, SpongeBob unplugged the coffee maker." SpongeBob gulps and says he's so fired. Karen continues loading the formula. Plankton says here it comes. But Karen says Plankton has made her so happy. She starts crying tears of joy, which causes her to spark with electricity. Plankton asks what's wrong and if she sprung a leak. Karen says no, she's just so happy she's crying with tears of joy. Plankton warns that she's shorting out. Karen's systems start malfunctioning. She announces the Krabby Patty formula loading is completed. Plankton says yes, but SpongeBob says no. The text on Karen's screen gets blurry, her circuits give out, and the word error appears. Plankton says no while SpongeBob says yes and celebrates that he's saved. SpongeBob points out Plankton's wife exploded, then awkwardly wishes them happy anniversary and leaves. Karen starts rebooting and loading something called EMILP. Plankton asks what that is. Karen says emergency mother-in-law program. Plankton says oh no. EMILP activates and starts yelling at Plankton asking what he's done to her daughter. He made her cry. She says Karen could have been with an ATM, someone with money, but she chose Plankton. The episode ends with the mother-in-law program continuing to scold him. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Chum Caverns, the episode where Plankton finds an underground cave, Mr. Krabs forces customers to buy. The episode begins with Mr. Krabs kicking a mom and her son out of the Krusty Krab. He yells that next time they should read the sign about the mandatory side of fries policy. Mr. Krabs takes another customer named Gus to the register boat and calls him a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed customer. Gus starts to say he doesn't want to eat, but Mr. Krabs interrupts by putting his claw into Gus's mouth. Mr. Krabs finishes Gus's sentence by saying he doesn't want to stop spending money here. Well, mister, Krabs won't keep him from doing what he wants. He orders a Krabby Patty with the works for Gus. Gus says he's not hungry. Mr. Krabs laughs and says that's funny. Then he handcuffs Gus to the register boat. Mr. Krabs says he'll think about that joke while Gus buys a kelp soda. Mr. Krabs goes into the kitchen where SpongeBob is flipping patties as usual. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob he's doing it all wrong. He hands SpongeBob another spatula so he can flip 2 patties at the same time and do twice the work. SpongeBob gasps excitedly and does it. SpongeBob starts to call Mr. Krabs a genius, but Mr. Krabs finishes the sentence himself, saying perhaps or maybe he's just a little off. He walks away. SpongeBob wishes he could be a little off too. The hidden formula. Mr. Krabs walks past Gus and into his office. Gus asks if Mr. Krabs is going to let him out. In his office, Mr. Krabs trips on a loose floorboard. He uncovers it to reveal the Krabby Patty secret formula in a bottle. Mr. Krabs complains about these flimsy nails. How is he supposed to hide the formula with this problem? Well, it's the life he chose to live. He nails the floorboard back down. Plankton watches this from his enormous telescope that goes out of the chum bucket and into the Krusty Krab through the chimney. Plankton asks Karen if she saw that. Karen says, yeah, mister. Krabs hides his formula under the floor. So what? Plankton says, so everything. Because that means he knows where it is. Karen points out that doesn't mean Plankton can get to it. Plankton asks what kind of wife she is and says they'll just see about that. Digging underground. The scene cuts to Plankton using a giant mining drill powered by him pedaling a stationary bicycle. Karen appears on a screen inside. Plankton says he knew this machine would come in handy. Karen just says, uh-huh. Plankton tells Karen to turn on the navigation system. Let's get this show on the road. Karen says to dig 50 meters, then turn right. Plankton does so, digging straight down and then turning at a 90-degree angle. Plankton laughs and says at this rate, they'll have the formula before you can say anything. But the machine stops when it hits a giant boulder. Plankton says barnacles and asks, what now? Karen says it appears they've stumbled into a mishap. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place, literally. Plankton says they'll just dig deeper and go around it. Karen tries to warn him that the only problem with that is something, but Plankton tells her to be quiet. He's concentrating. Plankton starts to go under and around the rock. He celebrates that this is what happens when he makes his own decisions. But then he screams. The drill goes through the roof of an underground cavern, and they fall into a completely enclosed cave. The drill lands in an underground river, and Plankton comes out the exhaust pipe. Plankton asks what happened. Karen appears on her mobile base. She explains that right before Plankton started making his own decisions, she was about to say they were digging right above an underground cave. She shows a diagram on her monitor of the cave structure. The beautiful caverns. Plankton looks around at the river flowing through the cave, the dark stalactites dripping with water, and a waterfall. He says he's never seen such beauty and starts to cry. Karen has spark plug-shaped tears coming down on her screen and makes sobbing sounds. Plankton says it's just a shame no one else can see it. Karen continues sobbing, then a light bulb appears on her monitor. She tells Plankton she knows how to push Mr. Krabs out of business. They'll lure customers underground with this gorgeous scenery. Plankton tells Karen to please be quiet because he's trying to process his emotions. Then he says he thinks he knows how to push Mr. Krabs out of business. They'll lure customers underground with this gorgeous scenery. It's the exact same idea, Karen just said. Karen just sighs in frustration. Plankton says he's so good at coming up with ideas. Growling comes from another cave attached to this one. Plankton sees cave dwellers, which are big, hairy orange creatures with brown hair, sharp tusks, and green lips. They come out of a cave opening. Plankton pulls out a whip and whips them into submission. They all sadly huddle in a corner. Plankton says that's better. From now on, they'll be his minions, servants to follow his every order. He declares this kingdom will be called the Chum Caverns. May the people of Bikini Bottom shudder in awe of its majesty. He laughs evilly. The grand opening. Later, a girl named Susie drags her mother Abigail Marge by the hand to the Chum bucket. Susie tells her mom to hurry because she wants to see the Chum Caverns before the line gets too long. Her mother says it's already too late for that. A long line forms in front of a bucket-shaped elevator in front of the Chum bucket. The elevator opens, people crowd in, it closes, and it lowers them down to Chum Caverns. Inside Chum Caverns, there are tables all around an eating area with a great view of the waterfall. One of the cave creatures squirts chum onto a tray for a customer and snarls. The customer says the food is hideously inedible, but the decor is so amazing he can't resist spending his money here. SpongeBob is next in line and orders 2 orders of chum nuggets. The cave creature screams. SpongeBob says that certainly is chum and such steamy food deserves payment. Plankton takes SpongeBob's money. Plankton yells for Mr. Krabs to eat his heart out. He's even profiting off of Krabs' most loyal worker. He's running out of space for all this money. Does Mr. Krabs have an empty safe he can borrow? Plankton laughs but says seriously, this is getting really heavy. He falls under the weight of all his money. Patrick sits at a table with Chum sticks. SpongeBob joins him and asks if this place isn't amazing. Patrick tries to respond with a mouthful of food, spitting it into SpongeBob's eyes. SpongeBob blinks and flings the food back into Patrick's mouth. SpongeBob says, you don't come down here for the food anyway. You come for the underground splendor of the Chum Caverns. Patrick spits more food into SpongeBob's eyes and mentions the gift shop. SpongeBob remembers the gift shop, and they run to it laughing. Mr. Krabs gets jealous. Later, SpongeBob walks into an empty and abandoned Krusty Krab, wearing a rubber stalagmite hat merged with a mining helmet. He says he's got cavern fever. Mister? Krabs asks where SpongeBob has been and what that ridiculous thing on his head is. SpongeBob says it's a stalagmiter, available exclusively at the Chum Caverns gift shop. Mr. Krabs gets angry that SpongeBob spent all the money, Mr. Krabs doesn't pay him at his arch-rival's business. Plankton is really cleaning up down there, which means it's time to start running him into the ground. The scene cuts to Plankton serving an order in Chum Caverns. The entire cave shakes and rumbles, and cracks form in one of the walls. Mr. Krabs bursts through with a jackhammer. Plankton asks what Mr. Krabs is doing here. Mr. Krabs says he's here to steal back his customers with the savory flavor of the Krabby Patty. He moves a patty back and forth before their eyes and they drool. He tells them to go get it and motions to SpongeBob, who is manning a burger stand. All the customers rush over. Plankton says Mr. Krabs can't just slither down here and steal all his customers. It's unethical. Mr. Krabs says unethical? This is perfectly legal. He calls all building rights under his restaurant. Plankton says sea turtles, Mr. Krabs called it. He always was good with legal talk. Plankton jumps onto his drill and says if Mr. Krabs thinks it's fair to undercut his business, then Plankton will undercut him. He digs underneath Mr. Krabs, which causes the ground to crumble, and Mr. Krabs falls down a level. The underground battle. Plankton asks how it feels being in the hole, so to speak. Not well, he'd imagine. Now hold still so Plankton can bury him. Mr. Krabs says not if he buries Plankton first. He tunnels under Plankton with his jackhammer, so Plankton's chunk of rock falls too. The customers and SpongeBob watch, all wearing the stalagmite hats. Plankton says fine, have it his way. They constantly tunnel under each other in a pattern similar to an old arcade game. They fall into a very deep tunnel and rocks seal it up. Mr. Krabs gasps and the echo repeats throughout the space. Mr. Krabs yells that they're trapped. Plankton says this is all Mr. Krabs' fault. He should boil and butter him for this. Mr. Krabs says Plankton doesn't grasp the severity of their situation. They're trapped down here with no way out. Plankton says there may be no way out for Mr. Krabs, but he doesn't need to worry about Plankton. His tiny size allows him to slip through rubble with ease. He tries to slip between some gravel, but the rocks are too heavy. Plankton says he can't make it. They're doomed. Mr. Krabs says that's what he's been trying to tell Plankton. They both wail. Mr. Krabs asks Plankton to comfort him. They embrace each other and sob. Trapped together. The French narrator says, 15 minutes later, they both somehow now have gray beards. Mr. Krabs says look at them, old and gray. Plankton adds that they're nearing the end. Mr. Krabs says if they get out of here with their lives, they should agree to work together. Plankton says Mr. Krabs is right. They should bury the hatchet now and forever. Mr. Krabs says they have a deal. No more bickering. Plankton agrees. No more tricks of any kind. They shake on it and hear a rumbling sound from above. Mr. Krabs asks if Plankton hears that. SpongeBob breaks through the top with a jackhammer yelling surprise. Mr. Krabs celebrates that SpongeBob found them. He should pay him for this. SpongeBob suggests just paying him for the job he already does. Mr. Krabs tears off his beard and asks where Plankton went. Plankton is running up the tunnel with the jackhammer saying he's way ahead of Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs yells that Plankton better not be trying to steal the formula. Plankton says he is, and he will. Mr. Krabs asks what about their deal. Plankton says they're still working together. Mr. Krabs is helping Plankton steal his formula. Plankton tunnels up and resurfaces on the other side of the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs says just wait until he gets his claws on Plankton. Plankton is digging up to the Krusty Krab saying it's time to get that formula. But the land beneath the Krusty Krab begins to crumble. All the tunnels made in the episode left no support for the building, so it sinks into the earth and lands at the bottom of the tunnels. Now, SpongeBob, Plankton, Mr. Krabs, and all the customers are stuck in the Krusty Krab underground. The cave-in sealed the doors. Mr. Krabs asks if Plankton is satisfied with himself. Now he's trapped them all underground. Gus says at least they're trapped in a good restaurant. Mr. Krabs realizes they're captive customers. He should have thought of it sooner. But without Squidward, he needs someone to work the register. The episode ends showing Plankton and a cave creature working the register together. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have One Course Meal, the episode where Mr. Krabs discovers Plankton's fear of whales. Plankton attacks the Krusty Krab. The episode begins inside Mr. Krabs' office at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs turns off the lights, lights an incense stick, turns on the radio, takes off his shirt, and bathes in money. He says that's the stuff, right there. Then he sniffs and says something doesn't smell right. The scene cuts to SpongeBob in the kitchen. Mr. Krabs opens the door and asks what SpongeBob is burning out there. SpongeBob sniffs and says he'd say a high-grade explosive. Mr. Krabs yells, "Explosive?" The scene cuts to outside the Krusty Krab where Plankton is flying on a glider, laughing evilly. He tells Eugene to enjoy this and activates a bomb which blows up the roof. Mr. Krabs yells for Plankton in a muffled voice. He bites the wood in half hard with his teeth and says he just had that roof redone last week. Plankton says Mr. Krabs will be redoing it after Plankton is through with him. Mr. Krabs yells to ready ammunition. SpongeBob takes off his Krusty Krab employee hat, and it reveals a pea can underneath. Mr. Krabs opens the can with his claw and pours all the peas into SpongeBob. He then uses SpongeBob as a gun and yells fire. SpongeBob shoots peas at Plankton. The peas shoot through Plankton's air glider, but Plankton blows a bubble over himself, causing the peas to be deflected. The deflected peas hit the frying pans. One pan falls and hits SpongeBob. Plankton then fires a missile at them. Mr. Krabs yells to take cover. He picks up SpongeBob and uses him as a shield, but the missile just falls straight to the ground. Mr. Krabs laughs and says it didn't go off. Another dud from Plankton. Plankton asks, "A dud, huh?" and pushes a button. This causes the missile to transform into a robotic arm that squeezes Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs says Plankton is playing with fire now. Plankton says no need to get worked up. Just give him the secret formula and he'll be on his way. Mr. Krabs says he ain't getting it. Plankton says he implores Mr. Krabs to reconsider and presses the button to make his arm squeeze harder. Mr. Krabs tells Plankton to go jump off a plank. Plankton says he has ways of getting the information he needs. Where's the formula? He tickles Mr. Krabs with a feather. Mr. Krabs laughs wildly. Plankton says Mr. Krabs still won't talk. He tickles Mr. Krabs' nose with the feather, causing him to sneeze and blow Plankton to the ground. Plankton says, "Okay, mister. Krabs won't crack," but he doesn't think SpongeBob is made of the same metal. SpongeBob says he'll never talk. Plankton says they'll see what Mr. Feather has to say about that. SpongeBob immediately gives in and says okay, but he doesn't know how to get into the safe behind the painting in Mr. Krabs' office that houses the secret formula. Mr. Krabs won't let him near it. Everyone pauses. Plankton says clever, so it's behind the painting. Mr. Krabs growls. Pearl arrives. Plankton asks what he's smelling. Does Mr. Krabs have something burning? SpongeBob sniffs and says it smells like blubber to him. Plankton stutters, "Blub, blub, blubber!" Pearl comes in calling for her daddy. Plankton screams and tells Mr. Krabs to call off his daughter. Mr. Krabs says she's a big girl and he has no control over what she does. He thinks she's extra hungry today. Plankton backs up and tells the whale to stay back. He's seen those documentaries and knows what whales do to organisms like him. As he says this, he backs into the freezer. Pearl asks if he just went into the freezer. Plankton exits the freezer and walks out the door, telling everyone not to say it. Pearl says she prefers salad over Plankton anyway. Mr. Krabs realizes Plankton is afraid of whales. He chuckles evilly and tells Pearl she saved his business and his formula. Now get them out of this trap. Pearl says she wants mall money. Mr. Krabs agrees and says she's getting more like her old man every day. Mr. Krabs gives Pearl $1 from his chest like an ATM. Pearl thanks him and pulls SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs out of the claw. Mr. Krabs suggests Pearl swing by the Chum bucket on her way to the mall to give Plankton a scare. Pearl says to double her mall money. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob it's his turn to chip in. SpongeBob hands Pearl dollars and tells her to buy something pretty. Pearl says this isn't money. SpongeBob says no, it's even better. This is what Mr. Krabs pays him with. Mr. Krabs' wacky bucks. Mr. Krabs says to himself that it's all starting to catch up with him. He asks Pearl please, saying he'll do her homework for her. Pearl says no way because the Chum bucket is totally gross. Mr. Krabs says in that case, he's going to need to borrow one of her dresses. Mr. Krabs pretends to be Pearl. The scene cuts to the Chum bucket. Plankton runs inside. Karen asks how her triumphant husband failed this time. Plankton says Krabs had a whale. Karen asks if he means Mr. Krabs' big, scary teenage daughter. Plankton says he hears that mocking tone in Karen's voice and doesn't appreciate it. Doesn't she remember what happened to his ancestors at the hands of those beasts? The scene shows Plankton's family being eaten by a whale. Karen says when Plankton needs a break from his delusional paranoia, the trash needs attention. It's ripened. After a bubble transition, Plankton is taking out the trash. Mr. Krabs, dressed as Pearl, emerges from the dumpster saying he's hungry. Plankton screams and runs back inside, barring the door. He hides by a machine, saying that should keep her out. Mr. Krabs, dressed as Pearl, sneaks up behind him, breathing heavily, and says he wants Plankton meat. Plankton yells and runs out of the lab, telling Karen that she's here and she got in. Karen asks what Plankton is talking about. Plankton says there's a whale in the laboratory. Karen asks if he's out of his mind. Plankton tells her to see for herself. Karen checks the lab and says there's no whale in there. Plankton swears a whale was just there, next to the machine. Karen says that's enough and rolls away. Plankton calls after her, but Karen hums and says she's not listening. Plankton's paranoia. The French narrator says 16 paranoia-filled days later. Karen calls for Plankton, saying his dinner is ready. The scene shows Plankton sitting in his chair with long gray hair, a long beard, long fingernails, and 2 boxes of tissues on his feet as shoes. Plankton says yes, he can hear Karen. Can she bring it up? He can't risk stepping into the light because the whale might see him. He cries. The camera zooms out to show Mr. Krabs, dressed as Pearl, looking at Plankton evilly through the window. Mr. Krabs laughs. After a bubble transition to night, Plankton is in his bed feeling uncomfortable. He's grunting and shivering. Plankton starts having a nightmare where he's being chased by Pearl. He falls into her blowhole and lands in her mouth. He bangs on Pearl's teeth, yelling to get him out. Pearl laughs evilly, then flings Plankton into her throat with her tongue. Plankton screams as he falls into her stomach, where his ancestors find him. His granddad says Plankton is brave standing in that gastric acid. Plankton realizes what it is, and his body is half burned. He screams. Plankton wakes up from the nightmare screaming. He says he can't take it. This is driving him crazy. He continues crying. Mr. Krabs takes off his disguise and laughs. After a bubble transition to morning, Plankton is lying in the middle of the road crying. He says what's the point of going on? He'll just be tortured for the rest of his life by that whale. That's it. He's done. The 4:15 bus should be along any time now. SpongeBob walks up and asks what Plankton is doing, lying in the middle of the road. Plankton tells him to go away and says he's trying to get run over. Better yet, just step on him as hard as possible. Would SpongeBob do that for him? SpongeBob says, sorry, but that goes against his good nature. Plankton says forget it, he'll just wait for the next bus. SpongeBob should go back to the Krusty Krab and enjoy himself. SpongeBob says okay and leaves. SpongeBob reveals the truth. The scene cuts to the Krusty Krab in Mr. Krabs' office with the Pearl mask on his desk. Mr. Krabs erases a picture of Plankton and says goodbye. SpongeBob enters saying sorry to interrupt the gloating, but he thought it would be important for Mr. Krabs to know that Plankton is laying in the street looking sad. Mr. Krabs gasps and says, really, he's a mess, then laughs. SpongeBob says he knows Mr. Krabs and Plankton are sworn enemies, but putting on a dress to frighten him seems like taking it too far. Mr. Krabs reminds SpongeBob that he disclosed the location of the safe where the secret formula is kept. SpongeBob says no need to remind him. He broke Rule #2 of the Krusty Krab rulebook. Don't worry, he can fix this. The scene cuts to Plankton angrily asking what it takes to get run over around here. SpongeBob arrives and says hi. Plankton yells at him to take a hike. SpongeBob says very quickly, he just wanted to tell Plankton that the Krabby Patty secret formula is not in the safe behind the painting in the Krusty Krab. Plankton asks why he should care. All meaning has left his life ever since he's been plagued by that whale. SpongeBob says it's okay. Everybody has a secret fear. For instance, Mr. Krab's secret fear is, he whispers in Plankton's ear. Plankton asks, really? SpongeBob says yes, and guess what else? That was Mr. Krabs in a whale suit that Plankton has been scared of. Plankton realizes this entire time it's been Mr. Krabs masquerading as a whale. He calls Mr. Krabs a conniving bottom feeder. SpongeBob says luckily, Plankton wouldn't have use for such information, would he? Plankton says of course not. SpongeBob says, alright, back to Plankton's self-destructive behavior. Thanks for the talk. Plankton says no thank you, and laughs evilly. Plankton gets revenge. After a bubble transition, Mr. Krabs is having fun putting on the Pearl costume. He says he thinks he found his second calling. Plankton ain't even a challenge anymore. Plankton asks if that's so. Mr. Krabs asks if Plankton is back for more. Well, here it goes. He breathes deeply and says boo. Plankton says Mr. Krabs doesn't scare him. Mr. Krabs tries to pretend he's Pearl, not Krabs. Plankton says the jig is up. He knows all about the suit and Mr. Krabs' secret fear. Mr. Krabs asks what secret fear. Plankton tells him to see for himself. The robotic arm squeezes Mr. Krabs. Plankton tells him to enjoy the show. A mime appears. Mr. Krabs says no and tells Plankton to make it stop. He cries. Plankton laughs evilly and asks if it doesn't feel so good on the other end. He's loving this. SpongeBob says if he were Plankton, he wouldn't be so smug. Plankton asks why not. SpongeBob says because a hungry pod of whales just showed up for its early feeding. Plankton gasps. Whales appear outside. Plankton screams about not another feeding and tells them to get him out of here. He removes a nail from the floor and jumps inside the hole. SpongeBob puts a cork in the hole, turns off a projector to make the whales disappear, and gets Mr. Krabs out of the robot arm. Mr. Krabs says SpongeBob redeemed himself. He then tells the mime that it's really creeping him out now. The episode ends. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Karen 2, the episode where Plankton replaces Karen S. Karen makes dinner. The episode starts in the Chum bucket, where Karen drops some chum from a paper bag onto a tray. She says another bag of chum and smells it with disgust. Now to shape this into His Highness's dinner request. Karen's screen shows a drink, pizza, a hamburger, and pie. She releases a laser from her head and shoots it at the chum pile. The chum becomes a drink, a pie, and more chum. She delivers it to Plankton. Plankton is using a welding tool on a circuit board and says he's almost done. Karen gives him the food and tells him to eat up. Plankton asks what this is supposed to be. Karen explains it's chum seaweed, chum pot pie, chum con coral, and chum tea, also known as dinner. Plankton says Karen's memory banks are gummed up again. He did not request chum pot pie. He requested chum stir fry. Karen points out she told Plankton months ago that her memory is full, but he's been too busy with his latest project. She asks how he plans on failing to steal the Krabby Patty formula this time. Plankton tells his computer wife not to start with him. This plan is foolproof. He laughs evilly and picks up a circuit. Not only will he soon get the formula, but he'll get rid of Karen's bad memory as well. He places the circuit board into a motherboard and presses a button. A robot screen turns around and points toward Plankton. He tells Karen he wants her to meet his new computer wife. The screen lights up. Plankton announces Karen 2. Karen gasps and says Karen 2? She's been replaced? Plankton says he's afraid so, but can she blame him? Karen 2 has triple the processing power, all the latest software, and a sleek space-age design. The whole package. The replacement. Karen says she can't believe this. After all, she's done for Plankton. He dumped her for this cheap pile of plastic. Plankton says, well, he had to cut costs somewhere. Karen 2 asks who Plankton is calling cheap. At least she doesn't rust. Karen says Karen 2 is going to wish she deleted that comment. Plankton tells Karen not to take it so hard. She'll find love again. Maybe she'll meet a nice adding machine. Karen says that does it. Her screen shows loading jealousy scheduler with a loading bar. Plankton asks why he programmed her with a jealousy scheduler. When the scheduler becomes fully loaded, a laser comes from Karen's head. Plankton asks why he also gave her a molecular rearranger ray. Karen's screen shows a picture of a pie and then a stir-fry. She aims the laser at Plankton and says, here's his stir-fry. She blasts the ray at Plankton, but he dodges it. Plankton says, let's not do something they might regret. He runs the other way until Karen appears in front of him. Karen says regret is the one thing he left out of her operating system. She charges up her ray, preparing to zap Plankton, but then Karen shuts down. Plankton asks what happened. Karen 2 explains she accessed the Chum Bucket's power grid and remotely cut off Karen's power at the source. Plankton says Karen 2 is special. He knew it the moment he saw her motherboard. Goodbye, Karen Classic. Hello, Karen 2. He laughs and the camera zooms out to the Chum Bucket at night. SpongeBob finds Karen. The scene pans to the Krusty Krab where Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob are outside. Mr. Krabs says it's the end of another lucrative workday. He takes out his key and locks the doors. SpongeBob says in a depressed tone that yes, it's the end. He fills with tears and says quitting time is almost too much to bear. Mr. Krabs tells him seriously he needs to lighten up. Good night. He walks away. SpongeBob says good night and catches up to Mr. Krabs saying see you tomorrow. Mr. Krabs says yes, sure as the sea's wet. SpongeBob keeps saying goodbye multiple times. Mr. Krabs narrows his eyes in annoyance as they pass the Chum Bucket. SpongeBob trips over something. The camera zooms out to reveal SpongeBob tripped over a box labeled free, with Karen's body inside. Mr. Krabs says this is the first time he's been saved by a pile of trash and continues walking. SpongeBob gets himself out of the box and looks at it. He says this isn't trash. He picks up Karen's head and says it's a free computer system. Mr. Krabs runs back to the box and picks up Karen's head, saying the word free. He asks what kind of person would throw out a perfectly good computer. SpongeBob says judging from their location, he'd say Plankton. Mr. Krabs says Plankton always has been a knucklehead. SpongeBob asks if this could be one of Plankton's elaborate tricks. Mr. Krabs says perhaps, but who could pass up a free computer? He packs Karen's head back in the box and brings it into the Krusty Krab. They should plug her in and see what she can do. Karen at the Krusty Krab. After a bubble transition, they're in Mr. Krabs' office. Mr. Krabs turns on Karen's monitor. Her screen shows loading. Mr. Krabs says she's loading up. Now let's see how this dial-up thing works. He places a telephone receiver on top of Karen. Her screen shows an hourglass turning. Mr. Krabs asks if this thing does text mails. SpongeBob thinks so. Karen's screen shows the words Karen Classic with her picture. Mr. Krabs says that sounds promising. Karen starts crying on her screen, scaring Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs asks if computers are supposed to show emotions. No need to cry. Karen yells at him not to tell her not to cry. She continues crying. Mr. Krabs says she's malfunctioning. SpongeBob says it must be the dial-up thing. Mr. Krabs agrees and grabs the telephone, throwing it against the wall and destroying it. Karen says it's not the dial-up thing, it's Plankton. He dumped her for a newer piece of hardware. She continues crying. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to help him out. He pushes SpongeBob next to Karen. SpongeBob tells Karen to dry those computer tears. He's sure they'll get back together. Plankton just needs time to realize how much he needs her. They were made for each other. Well, she was made for him and specifically by him. And now he's built someone with more modern features who's better in every way. SpongeBob asks what his point was again. Karen sobs that men are all alike. She hops off Mr. Krabs' desk onto her mobile body and rolls out of the office. Mr. Krabs asks where she's going and tells SpongeBob that was smooth, real smooth. He comes out of his office and sees Karen looking outside the window. He says they should talk this out. SpongeBob warns Mr. Krabs to be careful because this could still be a trick. Karen's loyalty might still be with Plankton. Mr. Krabs asks what part of free computer SpongeBob doesn't understand. The scene cuts back to Karen, looking at the chum bucket through the window. Plankton's laughter is heard. The scene shows silhouettes of Plankton and Karen two having a romantic dinner together. Plankton says tonight they celebrate. Tomorrow the secret formula, he continues laughing. Karen says she doesn't ever want to see that lowlife again as long as she lives. Goodbye, you miserable little bug. Her screen shows a mouse picking up a Plankton icon and placing it in the recycling bin. Mr. Krabs says, well, in that case, welcome aboard. He puts a Krusty Krab employee hat on Karen's head. SpongeBob says all right, and they give each other high fives while Karen shows an annoyed face. Karen's new job. After a bubble transition to morning, Squidward goes inside the Krusty Krab and stops when he sees Karen at the register boat. Karen welcomes him to the Krusty Krab and asks if she can take his order. Squidward asks, my order? Mr. Krabs says Squidward must not have gotten the last company text mail. Karen will be taking over his duties from now on. She's efficient, and more importantly, Mr. Krabs doesn't have to pay her. Squidward asks if he's fired. No more taking orders, no more interacting with customers, no more SpongeBob. He's free and starts cheering. Mr. Krabs tells him not so fast. After a bubble transition, Squidward is in the bathroom holding a mop. Mr. Krabs gave him bathroom duty. Squidward sighs in disappointment. The scene cuts to 3 fish in line waiting to order. A customer asks for a Krabby Patty and a side of coral bits. Karen snaps that he'll get his Krabby Patty when she's good and ready. She turns to SpongeBob and says sorry, she's just going through a lot emotionally right now. SpongeBob asks if she knows what cheers him up when he's feeling down. Karen asks if he defragments his hard drive. SpongeBob says no, putting in a hard day's work at the greatest job in the world, the Krusty Krab. He hears thumping. The customers look to the door to see Karen too trying to get in the Krusty Krab, but she can't open the doors because she doesn't have arms. Plankton peeks out of a secret compartment in Karen 2. Plankton asks what the holdup is. That secret formula won't steal itself. Karen 2 says she's trying to open the door. Plankton didn't exactly design her with arms. Plankton says yes, that's true. He's got this. He's about to climb out but gasps when he sees Karen at the register boat. What's she doing here? Karen working at the Krusty Krab? Karen 2 gets pushed into the Krusty Krab by Fish, wanting to come in. She gets pushed in front of Karen. Karen says, well, if it isn't Little Miss Homewrecker. Karen 2 says, and if it isn't the washed-up Analog has-been. The fight. Karen asks who she's calling Analog. Plankton quickly goes back inside his compartment, sensing a fight is about to begin. Karen 2 says she sees Karen has taken her proper role as a cash machine. Karen says at least she doesn't look like she was designed to be a glorified vacuum cleaner. Karen 2 says at least she can say she was designed. Karen gasps and says, why I oughta. They start trading insults. Karen 2 calls Karen a rusty bucket of bolts. Karen calls her a glorified toaster oven. Karen 2 calls Karen a poor excuse for a housewife. The fish gasp and start talking. One says his money's on the one with the chrome backside. Mr. Krabs asks, did you say money? A microphone lowers down and Mr. Krabs grabs it. Mr. Krabs welcomes everyone to the fight of the century. For only $5.99 plus the purchase of 2 Krabby Patties, they will see the answer to the age-old question. Which is superior, high-speed integrated circuits or old-school vacuum tubes and diodes? Karen and Karen 2 start fighting. Plankton says this isn't getting him any closer to the formula. Karen grabs Karen 2 by the neck. Karen 2 kicks Karen. Karen uppercuts Karen 2 and she flies backwards. Karen 2 headbutts Karen. A crunching noise is heard. Plankton says, ow! Karen too realizes Plankton is there. She moves back from a squished Plankton. He groans in pain and the audience gasps. Karen tells everyone to stop because he's hurt. Karen too asks if she's throwing in the towel. Karen calls her a heartless homepage wrecking hussy. Karen's arms start spinning rapidly and she moves toward Karen 2. Karen's arms break off Karen 2's screen and Karen 2 falls to the ground and breaks. The audience cheers. The reunion. Karen says no one runs down her man. She asks Plankton to say something. Plankton says to take him home. Karen says even though he's a tiny green loser, she could never stay mad at him. But then her screen shows static and turns off. She falls to the ground. Plankton screams and dodges, yelling for Karen not to leave him again. Plankton opens Karen 2's compartment, takes her battery out, and places it in Karen's compartment. He hopes this works and asks Karen to please wake up. He promises never to take her for granted again. Karen's screen shows a spinning hourglass. Karen's screen changes to her speaking and asks what happened. Plankton says he had a reality check. That's what happened. The audience claps and Karen stands up. Plankton tells her to come home to the Chum Bucket. Karen says she had the strangest dream. She dreamt there were 2 of her. Plankton says 2 of her? Well, that is strange. Karen 2's screen explodes. Karen and the customers leave the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs says there goes his revenue. What is he going to do now? SpongeBob holds up Karen 2's broken screen and suggests they could rebuild Karen 2. After a bubble transition, Squidward is at the register boat wearing Karen 2's screen as a mask. He says in a robotic voice, "Welcome to the Krusty Krab. May I take your order? Beep, beep." Mr. Krabs tells him to keep it up because the kids love robots. Squidward sighs and says what he wouldn't do to have his face in a toilet right now. The episode ends. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Plankton's pet, the baby disguise plan. Plankton walks into the Krusty Krab wearing a baby costume. He pops up from underneath a customer's table and makes baby noises. The customer, Reginald, sees what he thinks is a real baby and watches as the disguised Plankton grabs a Krabby Patty from the table. Other customers say "aw" when they see the baby, and SpongeBob gets emotional while holding on to Squidward, saying it's the baby's first Krabby Patty. The baby costume walks out the door carrying the stolen sandwich. Mr. Krabs watches everything through a security camera in his office. He looks through a periscope and sees Plankton controlling the baby suit from the inside. Plankton talks to himself while walking away, saying he can't believe his plan is working and that it's like taking candy from a baby with a baby. Mr. Krabs runs out of his office and yells at the baby to stop. The baby turns its head around with mechanical squeaking sounds, looks at Mr. Krabs, then rotates its head back and keeps walking toward the door. Mr. Krabs screams and dives at the baby, body slamming it to the ground. The Krabby Patty drops from the baby's hands. Mr. Krabs exposes the truth. SpongeBob calls Mr. Krabs harsh for attacking what looks like a baby. Mr. Krabs holds the baby up by the diaper and tells Plankton to come out. He spanks the baby while grunting. A customer named Monica gasps and tells Mr. Krabs to leave the poor baby alone. Mr. Krabs says they're going to do this the hard way and holds up his claw. SpongeBob begs Mr. Krabs not to do it and holds up his hand to stop him. Mr. Krabs grunts and rips the baby costume in half. The head lands on the ground. Reginald covers his mouth and faints. Monica also faints. Mr. Krabs tells everyone to calm down because it's just Plankton. He squeezes the baby's body until Plankton pops out. Plankton says "goo goo" while looking at everyone. Reginald wakes up and yells at Plankton, saying he toyed with their emotions. He points at Plankton and pokes him in the eye. Plankton says "ow" from the poke. Mr. Krabs tells Plankton that he will never win and that Mr. Krabs will always be one step ahead. He puts the baby head back on the body and laughs. He takes the baby outside with Plankton still inside it and kicks it out of the restaurant. 2 women named Debbie and Mabel stand outside and gasp when they see Mr. Krabs kick the baby. Mr. Krabs says "uh-oh" when he realizes they saw him. The women and other fish yell at Mr. Krabs, calling him a monster. They beat him up with an umbrella, a purse, and a walker. The baby costume lands in front of the Chum Bucket doors and starts crying. Karen suggests getting a pet. Karen picks up the crying baby and brings it inside the Chum Bucket. She asks if Plankton failed to get a Krabby Patty again. Plankton, still in the baby costume, tells Karen to stop making fun of him. He asks why every single plan falls apart and says it's just a stupid sandwich. He tells Karen that trying to steal the formula is wearing him down. Karen lays the baby down and changes the diaper. She tells Plankton to stop thinking about the formula so much and to relax and get a hobby. She tosses the dirty diaper with Plankton in it into the diaper bin. Plankton walks out of the garbage bin through a door at the bottom of the can. He walks over to a window that faces the Krusty Krab. He admits that Karen is probably right, and that he needs something to take his mind off the secret formula for a while. He asks what he should do. Karen suggests taking care of an inferior life form. Plankton asks if she means a pet and says that's a great idea. He wonders how he will find a pet that fits his personality. SpongeBob pops up outside the window and says Plankton, which makes Plankton scream. SpongeBob says he has the perfect solution to Plankton's problem. Plankton asks how SpongeBob could possibly help him. SpongeBob tells him to try the local animal shelter and looks at the audience while saying that's where he found Gary. Plankton thinks SpongeBob might be onto something. The animal shelter visit. The scene cuts to the animal shelter. SpongeBob and Plankton stand outside the Bikini Bottom animal shelter. Pets bark inside the building. SpongeBob tells Plankton that his perfect pet awaits inside. He says if Plankton listens to his heart, he'll be able to pick out the right pet as soon as he sees it. The barking continues as they go inside. Plankton walks by different animals. He says some are too big as he passes worms and snails. He says some are too sloppy. Patrick sits in a cage and says duh while looking at them. Plankton walks by Patrick and says he's too stupid. Patrick says hi to SpongeBob. SpongeBob says hey back to Patrick but then stops. SpongeBob points at a rock with algae growing on top of it and asks Plankton about it. Plankton asks if SpongeBob is kidding and says that's algae on a rock. He tells SpongeBob he wants a pet, not a plant. Plankton says it's no use and that there's nothing for him at the shelter. A pet snarls as Plankton starts walking away. The pet's tongue grabs Plankton and he screams. SpongeBob yells that Plankton is in danger. Plankton says he can't say he's surprised by what's happening. Barking noises come from another animal, which turns out to be an amoeba. The amoeba growls and chomps the pet that's holding Plankton. The pet screams and lets go of Plankton. Meeting spot. The amoeba barks and jumps into Plankton's arms while continuing to bark. Plankton says, hey to the little guy. SpongeBob says the amoeba is cute and asks what Plankton will call him. SpongeBob says he looks like a spot. The pet chomps SpongeBob's finger and growls. Plankton says the name provokes a violent reaction and decides to name him Spot. Spot licks Plankton, then barks and pants. The scene transitions to the Chum Bucket with a bubble effect. Plankton tells Spot that he's his new owner and to shower him with love and affection. Spot just sits quietly without moving. Plankton tells Karen that Spot is not giving him unconditional love and thinks the pet is defective. Karen explains that Plankton will have to train Spot to do that. Plankton sighs and says he'll give it a shot. Training Spot. Plankton picks up Spot and sits him down, telling him to stay. Plankton says good boy. He tells Spot to sit and a squishing noise happens when Spot sits down. Plankton says very good. He tells Spot to roll over and Spot barks. Plankton says excellent. He tells Spot to shake and Spot shakes his whole body, which shakes the entire Chum Bucket building. Plankton says that's one mean shake and thinks they should burn off some extra energy. He asks Spot if he wants to go for a walk and holds up a leash. Spot farts out bubbles. Plankton assumes that means yes and puts a collar and leash on Spot. He tells Spot to march. Spot barks and begins walking as Plankton whistles. Time passes and Plankton gets tired and starts panting. He says they must have walked for miles, but then notices he's only walked to the end of the path. Plankton says their legs are too short for walks. He suggests playing fetch instead. He brings out a tennis ball and grunts while throwing it. The tennis ball lands on top of Spot and squishes him flat. Plankton screams and asks what he has done. He calls himself a terrible pet owner and yells for Karen, saying they need another Spot. Spot squishes himself back together and pops up from the ground while barking. Plankton says nice rebound and tells Spot that he gets squished a lot too. Spot licks Plankton, who sniffles and cries a little. Plankton says he hopes nobody saw that emotional moment. 3 fish stand near Plankton and say, "Aw," together. Plankton tells them to go away and they walk off. The scene transitions back to the inside of the Chum Bucket with another bubble effect. Attack training failure. Plankton tells Spot that today he'll learn how to be an attack pet to guard the Chum Bucket from intruders. Plankton wears an animal costume and tells Spot to pretend he's a burglar. He yells at Spot to attack. Spot whimpers instead of attacking. Plankton asks if Spot understands what to do and yells for Spot to come at him. Plankton says, uh-oh, and mentions he's losing balance. He falls over and asks for help. Spot jumps on Plankton and licks him. Plankton thinks about the situation and asks what he needs a guard dog for anyway. He says he can't even give Chum away for free. He decides what he really needs is a retriever instead. Plankton shows Spot a picture of a Krabby Patty and says this is the target. He tells Spot he wants him to retrieve the Krabby Patty. Plankton starts explaining that security is tight and that he has devised a plan. Spot walks away while Plankton is talking. Plankton flips to the next page of his plan, which has a picture of the Krusty Krab on it. He asks where Spot is going and says Spot is not ready yet. Spot's successful mission. Spot sniffs around outside and opens the Chum Bucket door, leaving by himself. He pops through the Krusty Krab's front door while still sniffing. He walks by Squidward, who stands at the register. SpongeBob walks out of the kitchen humming cheerfully. Spot goes into the kitchen area. A customer named Ralph starts to order a large something, but stops when he sees a moving Krabby Patty on the ground. He asks what that was. Squidward says he didn't see it and doesn't care about it. Back at the Chum Bucket, Plankton snores and drools while sleeping. Spot drops the Krabby Patty in front of Plankton and barks at him to wake him up. Plankton's eye pops out when he wakes up and sees what Spot brought. He yells that it's a holy plot twist and that Spot brought him a Krabby Patty. He calls it a miracle while heavenly choir music plays. Plankton tells Karen to look at what Spot brought home. Karen says that's wonderful and that Spot deserves a reward. Plankton says Spot can have anything he wants, up to half of his kingdom, which he corrects to laboratory. Karen says she thinks Spot wants Plankton's Krabby Patty. Spot pants and chomps the entire Krabby Patty in one bite. The punishment. Plankton screams no repeatedly. He tells Spot he's been a very bad amoeba. He says Spot will have to be punished and needs a timeout. Plankton ties Spot to the mailbox outside and says it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. Spot whimpers sadly. Plankton says, "Aw," but then tells himself he must be strong. Spot keeps whimpering as Plankton goes back inside the chum bucket. Plankton immediately says he can't do it and opens the door. He starts to apologize to Spot, but sees the collar on the ground with no Spot attached. Plankton yells that Spot is gone. He cries and asks where Spot is. He calls for Spot to come back while sobbing. He says he has to find Spot. The same 3 fish from before appear again and say, "Aw," at Plankton's sadness. Plankton asks if any of them have jobs. He searches for Spot around Bikini Bottom, calling his name repeatedly. He ends up sobbing at the Krusty Krab dumpster. SpongeBob walks out of the Krusty Krab holding a garbage bag. He asks Plankton what's wrong and puts the trash in the dumpster. Plankton says he lost Spot. The search for Spot. SpongeBob says that's terrible and tells a story about when Gary lost him once. He shivers while remembering being cold, alone, and starving. He says it was the worst 8 minutes of his life. SpongeBob picks up Plankton and tucks him under his arm. He tells Plankton they'll find his pet together. Plankton looks out from being tucked in SpongeBob's pants while they search for Spot in downtown Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob yells about a lost pet and asks if anyone has seen the lost pet. He holds up a sign that reads, "Have you seen this amoeba?" with a green speck on it. SpongeBob says it's a lost pet emergency and tells everyone to be on the lookout. He stops a man in a suit and asks if he's seen the amoeba. The fish asks if SpongeBob means the little speck on the sign. SpongeBob says no and points to another speck on the sign. The fish holds up his shoe and asks if the speck on his shoe is Spot. Plankton says no, that's a piece of gum. The fish gets excited and says he's been looking everywhere for that gum. He pulls the gum off his shoe, puts it in his mouth, and chews it. The fish tells them that if he was looking for a lost pet, he would try the animal shelter. Plankton says, of course. Both SpongeBob and Plankton say the shelter at the same time and head there. Back at the shelter, SpongeBob and Plankton arrive at the animal shelter at night. SpongeBob says he thinks it's closed and opens the door, which clanks. He says it's dark inside and that he'll find a light switch. SpongeBob says aha and flips a switch. Metal clanking sounds happen. SpongeBob says that's not it. He flips another switch and says he found the lights. Plankton asks SpongeBob what the first switch was for. SpongeBob says he doesn't know, but thinks it unlocks the pens. Plankton says he thought so because now the animals are loose. Animals growl loudly. Plankton asks SpongeBob if they should run for it. SpongeBob agrees and says yep. SpongeBob picks up Plankton and runs away while animals growl and chase after them. SpongeBob says he thinks they lost the animals. Plankton tells SpongeBob that before they're torn to shreds, he wants to thank him for helping look for Spot. SpongeBob says it was nothing. SpongeBob asks Plankton if he always had a double pupil in his eye. Plankton asks a double what and pulls a speck off his eye. He realizes it's Spot. Dramatic music plays as Plankton says thank Entropy that Spot is safe. He tells Spot that he was hiding on Plankton's eyeball the whole time and calls him a sneaky little amoeba. Spot barks and licks Plankton's eye. Plankton laughs from the licking. Spot saves the day. SpongeBob says he's glad Plankton found Spot. The animals growl again, getting closer. SpongeBob points out that the animals found them too. Plankton says goodbye to Spot and tells him this is the end of the road for them. Spot growls, barks, and jumps out of Plankton's arms. Plankton yells for Spot to stop. Spot barks at the other animals. The animals laugh at Spot because he's so small. Spot snarls and grows to a much larger size. He growls loudly at the other animals. All the animals run away back into their cages and the cages close automatically. Spot growls one more time, then shrinks back to his original small size. He jumps back into Plankton's arms. SpongeBob says wow and tells Spot he saved them. Plankton says he taught Spot everything he knows. Spot barks and licks Plankton again. The episode ends with Plankton and Spot reunited and safe from the angry shelter animals. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the Krusty Bucket. Plankton's morning mission. The episode begins at Mr. Krabs' house early in the morning. A clam makes a crowing sound like a rooster. Mr. Krabs wakes up and takes off his robe. He climbs into his bathtub to take a shower and turns on the faucet. The water starts running while Mr. Krabs begins to bathe. Inside the medicine cabinet, Plankton squeezes himself out of a toothpaste tube. He laughs and talks through a walkie-talkie. He says, "Fluoride to desktop, I'm in a position to raise no suspicion, over." Karen speaks through the walkie-talkie and tells him to cut the poetry. She asks if he got Krabs' hair sample yet. Plankton tells her to keep her pants on and that he's going to steal Mr. Krabs' hairs right out of his razor. He chuckles while grabbing a razor to take some hair from it. Mr. Krabs suddenly opens the cabinet door and says he'll just grab the razor. He grabs Plankton by accident. Plankton yells wait and no, but gets dragged against Mr. Krabs' face. Plankton's teeth scrape along Mr. Krabs' facial hair. Plankton spits out a hairball of Mr. Krabs' hair and coughs. He rubs the hair off his tongue while making a disgusted sound. Mr. Krabs holds Plankton up to the shower head and fills his mouth with water. Mr. Krabs says now for the rest of it and uses Plankton to shave his back hair. Karen processes the DNA sample. The scene changes to Karen reading a book while waiting for Plankton to return. Plankton comes into the chum bucket. Karen says, "Well, if it isn't my thieving husband," and asks if he brought her the hair sample. She sees Plankton's mouth full of hair. Karen picks up Plankton and removes the hair from his mouth. She takes one sample of hair and throws the rest away. She tells Plankton she only needed one hair. The scene changes to Plankton leaning on the glass of his cloning machine. He laughs and tells Karen she married a genius. He explains that by using the DNA from Krabs' hair and his own DNA from his antennae, he will create something special. His right antenna gets snipped off by Karen. Plankton yells, "Ouch," as his antenna is placed in the machine. Plankton says he will create a combo clone of himself and Mr. Krabs to finally steal the secret formula. He pulls up a lever and cackles. The machine turns itself on and fuses the hair sample and antenna sample together. The cloning machine creates a single being with Mr. Krabs and Plankton's DNA combined. The being turns into a blob and the machine turns off. Plankton laughs and says, "Behold, Plan Crab." The machine opens its door and the being steps out. The being laughs while the smoke clears to reveal what it looks like. The clone has Mr. Krabs' body with Plankton's head attached to it. The clone makes a sound like R R R R R R R. Plan Crab's abilities. Karen asks how this is a good thing. Plankton tells Karen to wake up and explains that the Plankton side will know everything the Krabs side knows. He says it'll be easier than taking candy from a baby. Karen says, and mentions how successful that was. She turns on a screen that shows a memory of Plankton trying to steal a lollipop from a baby, but the baby ends up sucking on Plankton instead. Plankton says this situation is different, and asks Plan Crab to confirm. Plan Crab tells Plankton not to waste his breath, and that he already mapped out the perfect plot to swipe the formula. Plan Crab gives Plankton a high five before leaving for the Krusty Krab. Plankton says great, and tells Plan Crab he'll see him soon. He sighs and says he loves that guy, or at least half of him anyway. Plankton laughs until he coughs and mentions he still has a hair stuck in his throat. Plan Crab takes over everything. The scene changes to Plankton waiting for Plan Crab at the Krusty Krab. Plankton asks where Plan Crab is with the secret formula and complains that it's been over 3 minutes already. A customer named Colonel Carper steps on Plankton. Plan Crab walks to the door and notices Plankton on the ground. He picks Plankton up. Plankton asks Plan Crab what the big idea is and what he's been doing all this time. Plan Crab says, "Oh, nothing much," and explains he's been stealing the formula. He shows Plankton the Krabby Patty formula bottle. Plankton's mouth drops open in surprise and his eyebrow falls off. Plan Crab continues and says he's been taking over the restaurant. SpongeBob and Squidward appear, both happy and wearing new hats. They cheer for Plan Crab and say he's the best boss ever. Plan Crab adds that he kicked Krabs out on his bottom. He points to Mr. Krabs looking through the window in depression. Plankton asks how Plan Crab did all of this. Plan Crab explains that all it took was a hearty handshake, which he calls the world's most persuasive handshake. He says it's his latest creation and holds his hand out. He tells Plankton to put his hand there. Plankton says an evil handshake is hands down the dumbest thing he ever heard. But as Plankton puts his hand on Plan Crab's hand, something happens. Plankton feels tiny hands, giving his hand nice, gentle massages and spa treatments. Plankton makes sounds of enjoyment like, "Oh, ooh, yeah, ah." He lets go of Plan Crab's hand and says the handshake is exquisite. Plankton tells Plan Crab he would believe anything he says. Plan Crab turns Plankton around and tells him to believe this. He steals Plankton's deed to the Chum Bucket. Plan Crab says he'll also be taking over the Chum Bucket from now on. Plankton says that sounds great to him while still under the handshake's influence. Plan Crab says Plankton's services are no longer required and throws Plankton in the air. Plankton says he still can't get over the handshake. He gets kicked out of the Krusty Krab and flies into Mr. Krab's coffee mug. Plankton says he's over it now. The Krusty Bucket is born. Mr. Krabs gasps when he sees Plankton in his mug. He sets Plankton down and cries that some creepy one-eyed crab took his restaurant. He sobs really hard. Plankton waits a minute and realizes Plan Crab took his restaurant too. He sobs alongside Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs says he doesn't know what happened but mentions that was some handshake. Plankton slaps Mr. Krabs in the face and tells him to snap out of it. He says it's a trick, calling it a dirty, beautiful trick. A truck with a crane suddenly arrives. It places something on top of the Krusty Krab. The cover pulls up and reveals the Chum Bucket structure. But this time, it says Krusty Bucket instead of Chum Bucket. The sign opens to reveal the words, the Krusty Bucket, Plankton and Mr. Krabs scream in terror at what they're seeing. The scene changes to Mr. Krabs and Plankton hiding and listening to what's happening inside the Krusty Bucket. A customer named Nat Peterson eats a patty and says it tastes even better than usual. He asks SpongeBob what's in it. SpongeBob says it's the same old patty, except now each one has a pinch of chum added. Plankton stutters in shock about the chum being added. Plan Crab gives SpongeBob the soothing handshake and calls him me boyo. SpongeBob breathes heavily, says wow, and faints. Mr. Krabs repeats the words me boy-o in sadness. Mr. Krabs and Plankton both sob a rainfall of tears. Storm clouds appear and rain pours down on both of them. Plankton sighs and says there's only one way to get their restaurants back. Mr. Krabs gasps and asks if Plankton means what he thinks. Both Mr. Krabs and Plankton say together that they have to work together. The rain floods both of them. Plankton coughs and says, hair. Failed attacks and schemes. The scene changes to Plan Crab taking out the trash. He locks the back door and goes to throw away some trash bags. Mr. Krabs and Plankton hide in a garbage can between brick walls. They're planning a surprise attack on Plan Crab. They both chuckle and give each other a high five. Plan Crab comes to the garbage can between the brick walls and says, hey, what the? A brawl is heard from between the brick walls. The fighting stops. Mr. Krabs and Plankton come out with a key, but they both collapse to the ground. Plan Crab comes out completely fine and takes the key back. Mr. Krabs and Plankton growl angrily. The scene goes back to outside the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs says Plan Crab may have taken their restaurants, but they'll take his customers. A customer named Fred sees signs saying the Krusty Bucket is closed and pointing to another direction. Fred walks over to Mr. Krabs and Plankton's food stand, buys a patty, and leaves. Mr. Krabs and Plankton chuckle, thinking they won. Plan Crab appears holding a drive-through sign but points it toward Plankton and Mr. Krabs. He says, this way, drive-through, literally. Mr. Krabs and Plankton get run over by a passing truck. Plan Crab heads back into the Krusty Krab. Plankton says he can't go any lower and asks Mr. Krabs to make it stop. Mr. Krabs picks Plankton up and says it looks like there's only one way out. Plankton asks if he means what he thinks. Mr. Krabs says, yeah, he's afraid so. Working as janitors. The scene changes to Mr. Krabs and Plankton sitting in Plan Crab's office. SpongeBob acts as a moving fan for Plan Crab. Plan Crab tells SpongeBob that will be all for now. SpongeBob asks if he could have just one more handshake. Plan Crab chuckles and says sure, then gives SpongeBob the soothing handshake. SpongeBob makes enjoyment sounds, melts, and slithers back into the kitchen. Plan Crab asks if the two scallywags want to work for him. Mr. Krabs and Plankton both say at the same time that they want to be the manager. They growl angrily at each other. Plan Crab says they're both in luck because he's looking for two new managers. The scene changes to the Krusty Krab restrooms. Plan Crab gives Mr. Krabs and Plankton working hats and toilet brushes. He tells them they'll be managing his toilets. He chuckles and leaves. Mr. Krabs removes his hat and says this is another fine mess Plankton got them into. Plankton whimpers and coughs, saying, hair. The scene changes to Mr. Krabs and Plankton scrubbing toilets with toilet brushes. Plankton says the humiliation in the bathroom stinks. Mr. Krabs says this is all Plankton's fault and that he's going to hurt Plankton at lunchtime. Plankton asks why wait and suggests taking a coffee break. He throws a coffee maker onto Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs' eyes pour out of the coffee maker like coffee. Mr. Krabs grabs Plankton and pushes him against a fast-moving toilet paper roll. Plankton pushes Mr. Krabs into the toilet and gives him a swirly flush. Plankton laughs and says, swirly. Mr. Krabs pulls himself out of the toilet and his body is all twisted. Mr. Krabs and Plankton get into a massive fight. A customer named Administrator Flotsam hears the noise from the other side of the bathroom wall. Administrator Flotsam says he's trying to read. Mr. Krabs and Plankton crash through the bathroom stall divider. Administrator Flotsam yells and gets caught up in their brawl. Plan Crab splits in two. Outside the bathroom, Plan Crab gives Squidward the soothing handshake. Squidward happily faints into his register boat. Administrator Flotsam runs out of the restroom, yelling about two guys fighting with toilet paper everywhere. He runs away from the restaurant. Plan Crab gets angry and pulls up his sleeve. He kicks the restroom door open and enters, asking who is messing up his bathroom. The doors fall down and Plan Crab sees Plankton and Mr. Krabs fighting on the toilet. Plankton says Mr. Krabs did it. Mr. Krabs says Plankton did it. Both of them keep saying no, he did it, back and forth while continuously arguing. Plan Crab gets confused by their arguing. All of a sudden, his head splits into two halves. One head is green Plan Crab and the other head is red Plan Crab. Green Plan Crab tells Plankton to get off Mr. Krabs. Red Plan Crab says it was obviously Krabs' fault. Green Plan Crab asks why Red Plan Crab is siding with Plankton. Red Plan Crab asks why Green Plan Crab is siding with Krabs. Plankton points out they're arguing. Mr. Krabs notices they're splitting up. Green Plan Crab yells, "Stop hitting myself," and hits Red Plan Crab. Red Plan Crab says, "Ow," and hits Green Plan Crab back. He also says, "Stop hitting myself," and tells Green Plan Crab he's sick of him. They bash their heads into each other. Green Plan Crab asks what in Neptune's name is wrong with himself. The two heads keep fighting and arguing with each other. Mr. Krabs asks if that's what they sound like when they fight. Plankton says he hopes not because that's pathetic. Green Plan Crab and Red Plan Crab keep hitting each other while saying they can't stop because they're torn between two sides. The final handshake. Green Plan Crab and Red Plan Crab split into two separate beings. They both growl angrily at each other until Mr. Krabs and Plankton appear wearing referee outfits. They break up the fight while blowing whistles. Mr. Krabs says he wants a clean fight with no rough stuff. He tells them to go back to their corners when the bell rings and come out fighting. Plankton says first they have to shake hands. Green Plan Crab says fine. Green Plan Crab and Red Plan Crab give each other a handshake. At the same time, they both get the same massage and spa treatment that the original Plan Crab gave out with his handshake earlier. Green Plan Crab chuckles warmly. Red Plan Crab says, "Wow, this is a great handshake." Green Plan Crab and Red Plan Crab both melt into puddles on the floor. The only things left are their severed hands. Plankton asks if they're splitting so soon. Mr. Krabs and Plankton laugh together. Mr. Krabs says, "Oh, you," while laughing. Plankton coughs and says hair again. Mr. Krabs says he'll get that for Plankton. He steps on Plankton to make him cough out a hairball. The hairball chuckles and says freedom before the episode ends. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.